good.
Nice.
Used to the ad for free, get wrecked loser. God damn it. Thanks for the raids, Condis, Sugarcane. Let's see if Can you guys merge the chat?
Do sound checks.
When is that? Oh. Dead.
Chat. Oh, so, fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. Fuck, chat. This was the, shit, fuck. Fuck, what was I about to say? That's... Fuck, I'm depressed. That was the run. That was the run. That was the run. That was the run. And I'm dead. You see what I'm doing, by the way? I guess you see what I'm doing, by the way. I'm just doing this. I'm just deleting these. Oh. Fuck, man. That was so brutal. I mean, there was one shot. I'm pretty sure every single thing he did was one shot, by the way. That was fucked. I forgot last time I fought Elder, I had fucking tenacity. Like, yeah, I mean, he was just crazy. He's crazy brutal. It's hard as fuck.
Yo, sad to see you die, brother. Why don't you make it Punish Core instead? Punish Core is the perfect middle ground between hardcore content and limited time deadline.
I like
Go
hardcore.
again, one last time. Come on, God Gamer, you can do it. You will do it, Straw.
How big do you want it? How big do we do the interview? How do I go again? 36. Oh my god. I need more loot to drop, don't I? I need more loot to drop. I need more loot to drop if I want any chance. Yeah. We're gonna go. What happened? I pressed F1 and it totally crashed. Yo, I just crashed it, bro. I crashed it. I crashed it. I had so many fucking... Okay, it's any auto fuel. Does anyone know there's another auto fuel? Does anyone know there's any other auto fuel mods that could do this? No.
Wow, Vegeta, look at that base. There are Gatling turrets on it. What does the scouter say about Quin's power level?
Kakarot! He's died like 30 fucking times. It's only 69. Are you seriously dumb enough to think he could beat a Saiyan toddler in strength? I've seen fingers bigger than those arms.
Show mods, please. Is there anyone know there's something else that's like this? I need one that's like the fuel mod, except it works. Look at this. Airship plus Lazy Vikings. It's called Lazy Vikings. Lazy Vikings. Mod that automates your killing smell, spilling wheels, 1 mil, 6 minutes. Updated 2025. Perfect. Auto fuel.
Hey bud, hope you doing good. I haven't watched you since a week because you got me hooked to Valheim and I didn't wanted any spoilers. Was a pretty cozy game after all. How was your Ashlands run?
Those are my mods there, bros. There's my mods there. This should help. No roof workbench. It's unethical, I feel like. Because you gotta put a roof. But then again, it's just kind of cancer. Set your resources to 2x. Should I just remove the hunting mod and just put resources to 2x? Nah. I mean, it just sucks. I had to farm a lot. I just had to farm. Every run I gotta farm like 20,000 fucking boars. It is what it is. It is what it is. It is what it is. Dude, my shit is not paused, right? That is just his screen is just this. It's just this. Wait, was space K play? Is this? I don't know. They're just testing audio, I guess. AAA crafting. No. We're good enough. That's good. I'm gonna change the epic loot. I'm gonna change the ratio. So from 0.8 to 0.6, 7. Let's go 0.7. 30% of loot is loot. 70% is materials. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Can everyone see us? Can everyone hear us? Chat, how's it looking? Get the feedback from there before we get started. Looking like audio's all good. Yeah, everyone's good. Like, we'll just do the standard audio test on this side of things. Guys, you go ahead and say something.
Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Jonathan, go for it.
Hello. Nice to see all you guys here today.
Mark, go for it.
Hello, chat. This is your mic check from Mark. Test, hello.
There we go. Well, without further ado, welcome to the Dawn of the Hunt version of the Tavern Talk podcast, chat, whatever you want to call this thing here that we do. And the very first question that we have, sort of the icebreaker here, the one that you've probably been spammed about in every single way you can, is patch notes when, my friends?
Well, I guess the thing Mark said earlier today is we'll post the patch notes when we're done making changes. There's still some last minute changes coming in. At this point we're kind of like, we just want to get a few more of them final before we post the patch notes. There's certainly a lot of balance changes coming in hot on this one for sure. But I mean, look, it'll be like towards the end of the week, like maybe Thursday, sort of ish time, I suspect. We still have some things to do.
That's New Zealand Thursday.
That's New Zealand Thursday, so Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. Wednesday for you. Yeah.
Fair enough. So we structured this little interview with some headers. So we're going to move on to starting this interview with some follow-up questions from previous interviews you've done on news articles and also our Tavern Talk podcast, Destin, Siggy, and so forth. One of our first questions was actually about Perry. The topic of buffing the block mechanic was brought up, and the desire to shoehorn this in for upcoming patch was stated.
I mean, you guys know who the
so the
fuck
question
that is,
is whether or not this made it in or not.
You know who the fuck this is.
Well, it hasn't made it in yet, but we're still working on it. Like, I just have to see whether it feels good. In order to make it actually right, we had to do some animation stuff, which makes it take a little bit longer because there's some, but effectively, we want to have something that makes block a bit more special than it currently is now. If unfortunately I don't think I can talk about it until like I'm a bit more sure it's going in because I don't want to excite people and being like, oh, then it just didn't work. And I believe it's going to work. Like I've tested with it with bad animation and I can kind of see like, I'm pretty sure there's something here. But we'll see once the animation is actually in whether or not it works well. But it needs. It does need something to improve with it, and I'm pretty sure it will still get in for 0-2-0.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up to that. Like, is the desire for block is to make people actually use the race shield mechanic? That's the part of the block that you guys want to focus on, or is there more to it?
So I mean, in my opinion, I can tell you what's wrong with that block. I think. So one of the issues that we have in PoE is that you're only going to actually bother using a mechanic like that if you can then follow up with something that's reasonable to do.
Wait, what's wrong with this?
Like, you there was a theory before we tried parry that you're just never going to use a mechanic like that except in a boss fight because you know, you've got a bunch of monsters hitting you. If you're going to follow up to one of them, well, like you might, you know, like sure you block an incoming hit, but then there's another one coming, like, you know, another 500 milliseconds right behind it from a different monster.
Like that?
So effectively what that would mean is that you know, you need something to be able to do that actually allows you to respond in a way that isn't going to isn't going to get you killed, right? So in a boss fight context, you can use block effectively, but the problem there is just that like changing your build just for a boss fight is kind of not something most players are really willing to do in that regard. So it kind of ends up just being not used in both cases, because block can actually be quite useful in a boss fight if you know to use it, and you know, if you're actually used to using it. But as I said, most people don't bother because, you know, they could just be doing something else, and they've been doing something else during clearing. So we need to make block good enough to use in clearing to be able to make it something that people will use in boss fights. And in order to do that, it needs something extra, as I was saying. So you need some way to deal with the fact that you've got other monsters hitting you. So there just needs to be more mechanics around that. So as I said, we're in the middle of testing something, you know, like it'll have like, you know, there'll be something there that'll sort of ideally make it so that you can follow up more easily to attacks and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the goal with that mechanic.
So in one of the previous interviews, you said a very interesting line that kind of with you a follow-up question. I believe it was the Destin interview that you did. And you were talking about how you were balancing around, or you have multiple axes of randomness is how you're sort of getting your difficulty layers effectively. And so my question for you is, how do you manage to balance around having multiple interacting levels of randomness while also, you know, putting a limit on player power at the same time?
Right. Well, I guess what I would say with that is that usually the axes of randomness get boosted by, you know, your Atlas tree and like how many mods you're putting on maps and all these other things. So effectively, and that the player will tend to adapt based on their ability to be able to do things. So while the overlapping axes of randoms can result in obviously much harder fights that you know, can be very difficult, generally speaking, the degree to which that will occur is sort of controlled by the economic element of, like, you know, setting up your mods correctly on your maps and your Atlas, you know, and other stuff like that. So effectively, you know, like we are a game that allows you to set your own difficulty using these mechanics. And
he's totally right.
I would
like, are on easy mode.
I would expect that you won't get too many outliers with regard to difficulty, even when you're getting these overlapping mechanics like that, because, you know, obviously the less they're overlapping, the less chances there are for the really crazy ramps. Now we do still have to be careful about you know, life pools of monsters getting out of control and stuff. Like there was the issue in PoE 1 a long time for, like, you know, like completely unkillable rares and that kind of stuff. Like we still have to be careful about that. And so like we're a little bit more strategic these days with how we kind of approach like adding life to monsters and stuff like that. Like we're doing that in a better way than we previously were doing. Which isn't to say it doesn't still happen occasionally. Like I ran into a rare myself, even just like in a playthrough, even just in Act 3, which had life regen, and I was just having a real tough time with it. So it does happen sometimes. But I mean, like on some level, you want there to be challenges like that. You just don't want them to be so unkillable, and you don't want to run into them so frequently that you get issues. So
we have learned a few lessons from PoE 1 actually in that regard, which is because we ended up having all of the bosses and stuff have effectively life overflows to the point where they couldn't go anywhere. We've swapped to using this in PoE 1 as well, where we use, instead of scaling the life of the monsters, we now give them this toughness stat, which effectively has diminishing returns. So when you get too many sources, they don't get multiplicatively more difficult.
Right.
And that also, we do that with the same thing with like the rarity and the rewards as well. It has a thing where it's not. There was a point where, yes, everything would just multiply, and then literally the entire drop pool of a monster would be saturated to entirely unique items, which still can happen in PoE 1. In PoE 2, and in a lot of cases in PoE 1, we're using like buckets of rarity that are additive with each other, and there's this kind of league rarity we use, and then that's got diminishing returns as well, in the sense that it will never get so high that it will just multiply endlessly into some, you know, ridiculousness going on. So we are approaching the like difficulty from many sources better, and we are certainly approaching the rewards from many sources better to not turn once again into this thing that we have to end up all of a sudden re-engineering a bunch of stuff to solve. So
that kind of rolls into one of our next questions here, which is you did an interview with, I believe it was GameSpark, a Japanese website, where they were talking about Magic Find and the state of Magic Find, and you mentioned there could potentially be some Magic Find changes.
Delete it.
Game. Did you want to elaborate?
I'm trying to remember exactly where we landed on it, but Magic Find, it is nerfed. But the details of that are kind of arcane and internal in a way that's like kind of hard to even describe. I don't know how much we should even go into like the specific details around that.
I reckon we should we can talk about
Sure.
where we were going. So we are nerfing it in 020, firstly.
Good shit.
It is worse. When looking at it, the impact it was having on the shared number and quality of items you're getting is just
Fucking
too
trash.
high.
Yeah.
I just want to bring up one thing as a starting point, though, with this, which is that, so one of the things with any mod on an item is that you have to be able to feel the mod. And so the concern that I had going in was that you should still be able to feel Magic Find when you get that as a mod for the first time at early levels, which is why it's kind of balanced the way it is right now. And clearly that balance is bad at endgame with the way that it is. So there has to be on some level a thing where as you go through the game, the effect of that mod goes down. Because right now, the increase that you get at endgame is like, I can't remember what you were saying that it was like that you worked out. It was like the increase for having a Magic Find versus not was like something kind of crazy, right?
It's hard to. You were pretty easily getting 40-50% more rare currency, the currency you care about, just by running not even that many Magic Find pieces, to be honest. Like, I would say an actual inconsequential loss in character power to gain effectively what would be 40% more quantity of the currency you care about.
Delete it.
And this is bad. Like, this is just too much for like the amount of power you're losing to the amount of gain it's an obvious trade. Now there were obviously on live there are some issues with the however you pronounce it, Val Shield that has the effect of Soul Cores. And then the Soul Cores, and it's like, oh sweet, well there's 240 rarity for just everyone running that one item, and there are issues like that 100% that we're mitigating, like getting rid of those extreme cases. But ultimately it's just like, I think it was, as you guys pointed out last time, rarity is effectively now acting as what quantity did in PoE1 for the sake of currency and thus waste, don't sustain, etc. So we've had like a ridiculous number of conversations about this.
Well, the first thing we even discussed that we wanted to do was just to remove currency from from being given by rarity, but it turned out that was actually like a complete and utter disaster as far as complexity goes, just for various reasons, to do with the way the drop system works. Like, it wasn't as easy as that sounded. Then we also came to a realization that we weren't even happy with that anyway for various reasons, and so then I think we just came down to, okay, we just have to nerf it some other way.
Well, we had too many conversations, and engineering issues were coming up and complexity ones with the drop system, and then it was like, okay, well, we can't just leave it because we're unable to solve that. So we decided, at least for now, we're going to nerf it, especially on the diminishing returns axis, and then remove a lot of the outlier items that are just giving an insane amount of it for effectively, I don't want to say free, but not a huge trade. I would expect, you should be expecting a lot less power, certainly by at least the influence, and thus less necessity to use it, like in 020 100%. That being said, I would say we have not come to our resolution on this one, honestly. Right. We need to find out, we need to either figure out how we're going to implement it the way we want, like it affecting, I guess the last thing was not just not affecting currency, we were talking about it only affecting things that can be either normal, magic, rare, and unique was another option, so things that have a rarity. But I don't know, even then there was some back and forth, and then, it came again in the last conversation, it came up, what if we remove it again? And, like, everything's on the table at this point, and we just need to keep discussing it, and hopefully by the end of early access we actually have an answer that we're all happy with. So
I'm trying to remember, did we agree to do the escalating diminishing thing with level, or was that not in?
No, that was another thing.
I can't remember. For some reason I thought we landed on that one, but maybe
we didn't. No.
Okay, it was a different one? Okay, sure. Well, anyway. It's getting nerfed, basically, and so hopefully the problem is not a big problem in 020, but as Mark just said, potentially more changes need to come. It's honestly surprisingly hard now, with the way the drop system fundamentally works, to be able to make it so that a single drop pool, as they're known internally, is affected by certain by the stat like that. Yeah, and like the solutions that we were trying to do to get around that were becoming increasingly more hacky and horrible. In order to be able to do that, like there started to be discussions of like, oh, do we generate the currency anyway and then delete some of it and like random shit like that. And it was just kind of like, you know what? There's a dark path down here. We just don't want to like let's not do it. Let's not do all of that. Yeah.
I got a little follow-up question to more specific on the whole diminishing return part. Like the shield specifically, you talk about the Vol shield could apply such ridiculous amounts of Magic Fine. Would it be safe to assume, or if you could share the details on this diminishing return implication, does that go in a ramping scaling? Like the more you have, the higher the diminishing return? Or is it just a certain amount of diminishing return that kicks in after certain thresholds?
It's not thresholds.
There's no threshold in the
It
equation.
just
narrows to a certain value,
The
right?
equation is effectively has an asymptote at a certain number, and then the more you add, the closer you get to the asymptote. You know, it's a curve like that. You know, there is a point at which adding more is not doing much for you, but everything you add always adds a bit more. It's just that you know, like but you never actually reach a certain value. So that's it's always been that way, by the way. Magic Fine.
There are I don't actually know if these are the right numbers, but like the difference between like 400 and 800 rarity is probably a difference of like 3% or something. Like it's actually, there's a point in where it is ultra inconsequential, the point getting even more of it. So you have these guys who are even in PoE 1 where they're running like 1,000 rarity. It's like there's probably 60% of that is absolutely just a waste.
Okay, that's fair. I want to move on to another question that we had, which is a follow-up to our previous Tavern Talk, and that is a question that's been spammed, and it's about tier of modifiers. In PoE 1, tier 1, or actually tier 0 is the highest. It's flipped in PoE 2. We discussed some venues in our last Tavern Talk, whether or not you're going to flip it back and or maybe make it show like it's a tier 6 out of 12 tiers, so people could determine which one, if they have the highest tier or not. Where have you guys landed for point 2 for this one?
We haven't had, honestly, this has not been a thing that we've been thinking about and for probably since the last time we talked about it. Like it's one of those things that we should look into. I just honestly have not had time. So yeah, no changes there. The state is exactly the same as it was previously.
Yep. We're going to move over to another generic question we have, and that is whether or not you guys are happy with the current state of the trials, or if there's any changes you'd like to see coming.
Well, one change that happened, which I think we mentioned somewhere else, was that we found that accidentally the end bosses had double the amount of life they were supposed to have, which was a bit of an issue. So that wasn't great. What actually caused that bug? Because you told me that it happened, but I'm not sure.
No. I would not use the word bug.
Okay, that's kind of the way you phrased it to me.
I would use the term human error.
Okay, sure. Okay.
A mistake. There was a point in where towards the end, a lot of the pinnacle bosses got their life changed, like just before release, and those two got missed somehow, and their life was way too high. Right. That being said, changes to the trials. I do want to change. I don't have anything fundamental in terms of the actual full structure of them personally. I more so have a change in the content itself. Like it is worth, like, okay, for example, in Ultimatum, you have the 3 random bosses, not excluding the Trial Master, the 3 random bosses. One of those is actually a placeholder, like it's not actually meant to be used there. You wouldn't know because, well, maybe you would know. But for those who went to, like, Exile Con and played in a certain act, you might have recognized that boss from one of those acts. And it's just that we reused that temporarily since we didn't get the other one finished in time. And then a lot of the monsters in Sanctum and like encounters and the different, I guess the amount of randomness I would say is not high enough. Like it gets a little bit repetitive after a while, and we need to extrapolate on all that. And honestly, I would say that we didn't get the monsters to the quality I wanted. Especially probably just a number of the skills and the balance and a lot of what they're doing. I would say personally, structurally, overarching, I don't have a fundamental issue with them. I definitely have problems with the boss of Sanctum. Like that whole hourglass mechanic is just absolute garbage and just needs to be redesigned. Like there's nothing. Honestly, having had a bit more time beforehand would have changed that already, and I have every intention of fully just changing that whole mechanic, because like it is just like, now there's these things on the ground that if you don't pick up, you're gonna die, and how do you know that? And it's just obviously bad, right?
Yep.
So they're changing that 100%. And then the way people got around that in 010 is effectively kill the boss before it can do anything, and then you're good. So yeah, there's certainly changes to the actual monsters and individual bosses that I have in mind, but I haven't really thought too much about, changing everything, across the, actually how the mechanics work necessarily.
Fair enough. I remember me dying first time on that fight going in blind. It was because of that mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And the speed
it's
of
just
it
terrible.
scales with players as well. Like if you have a party.
It's just actually bad. Like there's no excuse there or anything. It's just bad. Like it needs changing 100%.
So I have a little bit of a follow-up on something you said, which is the way that you get around that mechanic is effectively kill him, before he can actually do anything. And so my question is more about the state of bosses going into 0.2, because I know you guys are worried, and you've said multiple times one of the things that you were bummed to see was like people killing pinnacle bosses in like 14 seconds. So it's going into 0.2, do you believe this is going to be, different with the rebalancing that you currently have? What's your expectations? Because I know you also said you lowered the tier 0 of these bosses by, did I hear it correctly, half HP?
Correct. So my hope is that it will be fixed, because we fixed all the things we knew to fix. My worry is that more things will be discovered that mean that it is not fixed.
Of course I will.
But it's honestly incredibly difficult to actually find every single thing like that.
Impossible.
What I would hope that happens is that people don't find anything too outrageous before the point when people get into the pinnacle bosses, so that there can actually be a reasonable challenge for the first people who get there. But look, people do tend to find stuff. Obviously there's a new class as well, and so a bunch of new support gems and interactions and things that have been added, so there'll be things probably there that will just happen. So yeah, I don't know that I can expect that. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, everything that's not going to happen again, because it probably will happen again.
It will happen.
But as I said, we're just making every attempt to make sure that it doesn't. And yes, this was an exact thing that Mark said when he said, okay, we're lowering the life of these bosses. This might make this problem even worse. Because if people do find anything.
I wanted to lower all difficulties, right? Because it's effectively the situation we have right now is that by not lowering it, we're effectively saying that if you're playing a more average build, then you are not capable of doing that content. Right. And by not changing it because there are a bunch of broken builds is just unnecessarily punishing average users or, more, true. I don't want to say necessarily casuals, because we're still at the end of endgame here, but, within that spectrum of players, casuals are not even able to do the difficulty 0 pinnacles because, it's balanced around an extreme that is just way too high. And so I'd rather just have it be easier for broken builds and at least accessible to people who are playing more average or ideal DPS kind of builds, and sure, and then
to have 200 million DPS.
broken builds can go up to difficulty 4, and again now with at least all the uniques dropping from the pinnacles, you got more stuff to at least look forward to if you're killing difficulty 0. Sure, the chance to get it on difficulty 4 much higher, by the way, but it's still at least not just the good uniques are restricted from those players. And another thing as well, I know this is technically unrelated, but talking more about that accessibility for players to that content, we have made all the pinnacles are now not only half the life, they're also twice as easy to access. So we had this whole you should have to do 60 maps of Breach or Delirium or whatever to access the pinnacles. That's just too much. It's way too high. It was a kind of conservative number, and we've changed that. We've now made that 1 in 30. I know that's not actually how it plays because with juicing and all the mechanics and how well characters do, so it's just a rough number. But effectively, we've doubled the frequency in which you can access that content as well. And again, that's the same thing where it's we're unnecessarily restricting that content, even trying that content, behind a bunch of not only lots and lots of hours of gameplay, but also character build requirements that are honestly too high. And really it should just be you get more tickets at doing it, And if you can't do it, well, that's on you. That's your skill and that's your gear. But that should be the limiting factor more so than just like, holy shit, I have to play for 100 hours in order to even do this thing once, and then I just die and because I can't do it. Yeah.
A couple of other points to just make about this is that when the hardest content is too hard, it actually restricts build diversity because people don't see a build as viable if it can't defeat the hardest content, and therefore, like, effectively reduces the set of builds that are even possible. So that's something that we have to be really careful of, and that's part of the reason you want to try and like not have the top end be too high. But then the other issue is that, and I was just thinking about this, what it just slipped my mind now. No, it's fallen out of my mind. I'll have to just bring it up later.
And also just note on there will be more broken builds. Like it is inevitable. There's nothing you can really do about that, unfortunately. Like especially when we're talking about how we're still making changes and can't post the patch notes because we're still making changes. Like there is no guarantee that these changes we're making are entirely solving the problem or entirely not introducing new problems. Now, obviously, we're going to do better and better over time, but part of this is that we are just very aggressively making changes so that we can get it to the players to test ultimately. And I don't mean like functional testing, I mean balance testing on this level with this many mechanics and overlapping axes of randomness is impossible to test on an internal scale with the numbers we have. Like you need actual hundreds of thousands of eyes and hours to even be able to find everything. And this has been the case with Path of Exile 1 forever as well. It's not like it's anything new.
That actually reminds me of what I was going to say, which is that when we're going into 010, we didn't even really know what the right amount of DPS a player should even have was at endgame. Sure. Because that's impossible without getting more information about like, what players are realistically achieving, kind of where the average ends up being and that kind of stuff. Like it's actually very hard without that sort of data because as I think I've even said before, like we can't invest 100 hours into every test character we make. We have to kind of like either we do a playthrough, in which case we're not getting to the end of endgame on that one character because it just takes too long, or we're creating a character synthetically, which if you do that, you're not necessarily gonna end up in the same place as what you'd end up with if you if you didn't do that, right? So I mean, yeah, we can cheat every item into existence, but like, is it really how it plays out? It's actually very hard to say. So that kind of means that on some level, until you actually get it on production and you're actually putting in the kind of 100, 200 hours into a character and like, seeing what other people are doing and like being part of the meta and like all this other stuff, you don't even really know what the life should be. So just even having this first round, has helped a huge amount now that we have an understanding of where should players actually be in order to balance life of bosses for them.
I'm curious. I think that pretty much everything you guys just said feels really good to hear as well. And we talk about but build diversity, more broken builds going to be there. There's an expectation from John and the community and you guys to see really broken builds. We're going to find them. There's 600 plus different minions. We're getting specters that we can use for that. I mean, that's another road we can take, for that approach as well. At the same time, I want to circle back to the topic of actually temporalis not barely being touched, where the idea was it was too easily achieved because of broken builds. But now you're also at the same time saying what everyone else is expecting, that we're going to have even more broken builds. Wouldn't that kind of counteract the whole approach to that and make temporalis more accessible because of the availability that we're all expected to see with more broken builds available?
Well, okay, so when I say more, what I'm saying is, and I think Mark even might have used this example, is let's say there were 200 broken builds in the last version. Well, hopefully this version we have 100 broken builds, and then the next version we have 50, and then it'll halve each time, and then we'll sort of get somewhere okay, over time. So it's not to say that there'll be more in the sense that there'll be more than there were before. It's that there will be more in addition to all those ones got nerfed, and now people find some additional ones. But with regard to your specific thing about temporalis, so I mean, okay, what actually is the exact nerf to temporalis? I feel like we might as well just mention that.
The reduction to cooldown is lowered. So it's not giving as much of a reduction to cooldown. I can't remember the exact values, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't, for example, fully erase Blink's cooldown now, as an example.
Right. Okay. But it's still very good. Like it's still incredibly good. But the thing that really changed is that we lowered the amount of the relic that's going to drop, so there'll be less of them.
We also given that we had solved at least a good chunk of those problems for the early when temporalis was spilling out into the economy. We solved a lot of that, but also I think we have made it at least 10 times rarer, that unique specifically, in this patch. So Yeah, it is nerfed and it is less accessible, and like that's just okay with that one. It shouldn't be doing what it was doing before, at least with Blink and the mobility side of things. That's for sure, though.
That's good. Like that was one of my concerns here, and what you guys talk about. But that feels really good to get that clarified. I feel reassured with this. Speaking of clarity, one of the questions we had is regarding clarity in maps, because in the reveal footage there was a little display that most people saw in the top right corner, showing basically objectives that you could do in the map. So the question with this is this just an indicator of what's available in the map, or is this an indicator of an alternative way of completing maps instead of just getting all rares?
It is just an indicator of what's in the maps, and we still have the kill rare objectives. And so a lot of people will say, oh, you know, why don't you have alternate different victory conditions for doing maps and so on? And I understand why people say that, but the thing is that if we actually had a bunch of different objectives, I believe that you would get tired of those very, very quickly. Like killing the rares is already the thing that you want to be doing when you are mapping, and so that's the reason it was chosen as a victory condition like that. If we just have like all sorts of random shit, like
was no victory condition in the previous PV1.
There's going to be ones that you're going to get tired of very quickly. They'll be annoying and like various things, right? I mean, like effectively, what you'd probably end up with is something that looks kind of like, I mean, because when we're talking about alternate victory conditions, what you end up with is things like what's going on in Sanctum and Ultimatum, right? Like these are this is effectively what you end up with if you're talking about alternate victories, right? Because you come up with things and you try to work out the stuff, and it's like, while that is something that is cool to do sometimes, it's not something that's cool to do all the time. And so that's the reason why I would be really hesitant to do that on like every map has a condition like that. So that's kind of like where we're coming from there. So like what I think that we do need to do is make it so there are more interesting things going on in maps, which is something that we will probably focus on more in 030, is trying to improve on that. But I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to be like, okay, here's a bunch of arbitrary conditions you might have to fulfill. Like the rare thing is what you should be doing anyway, and that is why it is I mean, if you really come right down to it, like what is the victory condition of a map in PoE 1? Well, the answer to that is like we don't actually set one explicitly, but ultimately what you're there for is to kill the rares so that you know, and like all of the content. You are there to do the content in the map so that you get more item drops, right? So effectively, that's the reason why that's okay. So there has to be some idea of completion in PoE 2 because of the fact that you need to be able to do the map to move on to the next one. So that's why we wanted to choose the objective we felt that players should have anyway. And so I think that maybe players sort of view that slightly differently than we do, because it's like, you know, but that's, I guess, to explain sort of our view on how that is. It just should be there of like, here's what you're supposed to be doing anyway.
Okay. A question I had.
We did.
Go on.
I just want to elaborate on that a little bit more, because we did try some stuff internally there. Like we actually did. We had an iteration quite recently, in fact, where we had it that you had to complete the like league. So if there was an expedition, you had to do the expedition to complete it, and so on. And honestly, the internal reception to that was like pretty viscerally negative.
Everyone was very angry that we were taking away their choice with that stuff.
Like you're forcing me to do a ritual I don't want to do, and it's like, well, ideally it should feel good to do the ritual, but understandably, yeah.
So yeah, we ended up going back on that.
So we backtracked on that, and then it's like, okay, well, you could design a whole bunch of encounters, and then it's like, well, how do you know you're not going to create equally things that are divisive or things people don't want to do, in the same sense that those leagues came out? And it's like, well, I hate this one. Whenever I get this one, I hate it. I hate doing that map. You know, I just want the one when I have to kill the rares or some other thing. But to clarify just some of how it works, like if it is a boss map, killing the boss is the completion, right? That is what it will be. If it is not a boss map, killing the rares is the completion. If it is a tower, clicking the tower is the completion. Okay. And then all of the unique maps, which we're just kind of not referring to as unique maps really, but that's kind of how they appear, each have their own special conditions as to how to complete them. Are there any other types of maps?
No, not really.
Hideout is full clear the area, but you don't really need to do that often.
That's pretty much it, right?
Pretty much that's it, yeah. And then all the extra content, though, it is displayed on the map. It lists it under extra content, so like, because often what could happen is you go into the map and you're like, I don't remember what was in here. Like, was there a breach in here? I don't remember. So at least now that is all displayed, and you do know what you have to at least keep an eye out for, and it will display on the top right. Once you've done it, it'll get ticked. And so you at least know what's remaining, where you're like, was there an expedition in here? I can't remember. And then you're like, oh yeah, there is. I have to go and do that one.
So did I hear that right, that if it's a standard map with like a boss on it, you have like an overseer tablet or something you put in there and you kill the boss, that's a completion and you can leave the other rares on the map if you would like?
Correct.
Okay, so we got a new addition. That's nice.
The rare monsters in that context will appear as extra content that you don't have to do.
But it's worth mentioning that you're going to want to kill the rares because there is the map drop mechanic. So in a boss map, there are two that happens twice. Once on the boss for the upgrade, and once when you kill the rares for the sustain. So just to be clear here, like the killing all the rares, like at the point you kill the last rare, there's what we call a sustain drop, which is the one that's giving you a at tier 1, it's 100% chance to drop a map of the same tier, and then that goes down over time, but then gets countered by the waystone drop chance. So effectively what that means is that if you're playing with mods, you're always going to get a map from that last rare that sustains your drops. And so in a map boss map, that's the same, like the rares will still give you that, but then you're also going to get a map from the from the map boss too, but that'll be +1.
But if you have excess maps and you're not really caring,
then you don't have to do it, right?
Do the boss, move on. It's up to you.
So speaking of like waystones and sustain, is there any chance I could get a teaser out of you for another unique tablet? Because we know one of them, which is you can teleport anywhere on the Atlas. Can you hold us over until patch notes with an additional unique tablet?
Well, the patch notes won't even include them, right?
Yeah, we don't spoil. We don't spoil.
Yo, what the hell? That's pretty.
All right, well, I tried.
There is one. I hope it's there, as opposed to coming shortly afterwards. But I'm pretty sure it is. It irradiates the maps, and then you can complete the map. Completing the map will remove the irradiation, but not complete the map, and then you can run it again. So effectively, you can use that to be able to run all the maps in Radius twice with all of them effects and modifiers on them.
With the juicing from the towers?
Well, with the... I mean,
yeah, because you got 3.
If they're with the other 2 tablets or any other towers that are in Radius, yes, correct.
Wow, okay, that's quite a teaser. Hey, glad
that's
asked.
Probably the chasest one, I think, to be honest. So...
Okay, so speaking of maps, here's a balance-related question for you. So what I heard in the Ziggy D interview is the Rogue Exiles can appear in any map, correct?
Yep, they can. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so are they scaled from tier 1 to 15? Like, you probably get where I'm going at. When you log in, brand new character, your first map, are people going to RNG get blasted with the same Rogue Exile that can appear in the tier 1 or tier 15, or do they get stronger?
They do scale their life and damage and stuff like that.
Much like any monster.
Yeah, much like any monster.
They will.
So yeah, they like it'll be it's a hard fight, but it's like, you know, if you run into one on T1, it's just a T1. It's a T1 boss.
They appear from part 2 onwards.
Yeah.
The reason we did it that late is because they have like the full set of player skills, and I didn't want them to be using skills that you didn't have access to at the same level. Now we could have done a thing where we disabled those skills, but then you just end up with a thing where they're like not too interesting, but also it just like exponentially amplifies the amount of work to make now every version of them using different skills good, and that was maybe something that would have been cool and fun, but honestly probably too much work relative to what you get out of it.
Right. But yeah, you'll see them in campaign as well, in the second half.
And then they're in maps. It's 1 in 12 maps base-ish, but like, you know, we're still kind of iterating on the amount of content that is appearing in maps, so like we might even change this in the next few days. And then, yeah, the Atlas tree to spec into the rest. Now, they do scale in other ways, which is just, I mean, if you think about the uniques they have equipped, like if there is a like level 70 drop level unique item, obviously they're not going to have that before that level. So they'll unlock the uniques they'll have equipped, and this is for all uniques added for all time. They'll only be able to have ones up to the level that they're at, and then the uniques they'll be able to have, you know, if there's a level 80 unique, they won't be able to have that until they're level 80.
And since they use the uniques actually do contribute to the difficulty of the fight. So
or sometimes the ease, because they don't necessarily know if that unique is gimping their build.
Curiosity from my end here regarding the uniques and the Rogue Exiles. Since the Rogue Exiles, it is possible that a Rogue Exile could have killed an in-game boss. Can they wear those type of uniques as well, or that's a no-go?
No, we've kept that off because, again, it's simply because you are right, they could use it, but we're not going to drop them because we don't want boss uniques to come from non-boss uniques.
That's fair.
And we're much more strict about
we are
that
the main character,
now in
not them.
PoE2.
Okay, that's fair. Next question we have is on death effects. Are you currently satisfied with the current state, and do you believe that on death effects are something that is needed?
It's a mechanic.
Well, what on death effects are you referring to?
Yeah, what's even left that's egregious? I mean, that is my first question, is like, you tell me what's not good enough so I can go get it fixed.
I mean, we can take a prime example being like the bloaty guys that explode. I mean, if you have an army of minions, even more so now with Spectres being introduced with bigger
but that's
minions,
different.
that's
When you're
already
talking
hard
about
to
a
see.
specific, when you're talking about a specific
telegraphed.
monster, though, I feel very differently than how I feel about it on like rare mods, for example. Because
agree.
rare mods you can run into any time and you're not necessarily expecting them. But if you're talking about the bloaters, I mean, you know,
that's
like
like
those,
saying
you can see those
Pokemon
bloaters
is
coming a
bad.
mile away. Like you know about that particular one.
Well, to some degree. I mean, it depends on the build you're playing, but I mean, there are multiple on-death effects and ground effects that it's exploding and like after death. Like the issue that is being brought up is how the players are getting punished from going up to loot, maybe not seeing because there's loot windows popping up covering wherever the explosion
That
is,
sounds
and you
like a
have
personal
minions or
problem, though,
expects,
bro.
or you're still fighting something and you can't see it because there's too many
Nah,
effects
it's-
going on the
this is a
screen, and
terrible
then
argument.
you move to what you think is a safe spot, but you die.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's like saying,
100%
why
don't
put any
disagree
mechanic
with
in the
the
game that can
problem.
kill you? Because you might not be able to see it because there's loot in the ground, right?
I
Like,
guess the thing is, I can probably improve like 90% of it. I just need to know exactly them all, and I mean, it should seem obvious, I understand, but there's a lot going on. I don't know. Give me a list. I'll go through and either remove, change, or make them less punitive, I guess, in almost every case. Or at least, sorry, I don't want to say punitive. Like, they should just be fair. And I agree with you, the loot label situation, like, is a problem. Where all of a sudden now, you know, if it was a rare and it happened to drop 8 items, well, you don't even see the monster anymore.
Well, in the case of the bloater, for example, you could make the drops happen at the end of the explosion.
You could, of which all the clear speed junkies will be like, no,
Right.
I want it
But
now.
that's the thing you could do.
Because they want to pick it up
What
and
if
then
they
run
get
away
shattered,
before
bro?
it blows
I
up.
suppose it is
So
gonna split
I
up.
agree, though. That would be the thing I would have done. But yeah,
I mean, that's fair.
look, again, it's
We,
like I don't really have a problem with it as a general sense. I have more a problem of just if there is an unfair mechanic, I want to address that. Like, which is not restricted to on-death mechanics or not. It's just everything. If it is unfair, or there's no counterplay, which I guess are the same thing, then I would like to address it and do something about it, similar to how I talked about that hourglass mechanic just being garbage. Like, I'm going to be the first to admit that there's a bunch of just unfair bad stuff out there, which is the consequence of designing so many bosses and so many monsters, like hundreds of monsters. You're going to get some bad out there for sure. So we'll get them all in due time, though, for sure.
The follow-up question on this topic was that whether or not you consider the on-death effects to be something that is needed in the game.
I thought of Colby to dual wield knives.
Again, I've never thought of it in that sense of just like, do we want on-death mechanics? It's more like this monster would be real cool if it did an explosion on death, and like after it died, like the bloater, I think is a very cool example. But it's not like there's ever a specific mission to be like, we need to add more on-death effects or anything like that. But I would say it is somewhat contextual, and I do think that occasionally a thing like that happening is fine on some monsters. I would argue that, again, like the things where it's hiding them, making them invisible, or that you can't see them, or again, because there are builds that are moving at way too fast with too many effects, is more of a thing that
Feel the way,
amplifies
bro.
this problem, which is what we always see. Like, these things are less problematic when you first encounter them in Act 3,
Play some mythical
and then
builds.
they're far more problematic in Endgame when there's like a hell of a lot more going on. It's way faster. You can't really process what's going on as much, especially with probably summoner builds. So yeah, I mean,
it really shouldn't be the case that you can't see a bloater explosion coming.
yes.
Like, they're incredibly huge monsters. There's incredibly well telegraphed. It takes a very long time to build up. Like, that one really should be one that you can see coming.
I mean, I don't personally have an issue with the bloater specifically. Like, we got some of these questions from the community and some of the questions brought up from other content creators.
But that's what I'm saying. But it was the first one that came to your mind.
Some pussy beggars.
So I wonder if there's another one out there. That...
What I'd like to do is at least do a pass to make it that there is never loot and a death spot contesting. And often the answer to that might be either change the effect or delay the loot. It just depends what that is. There were cases like, for example, Rattle Cage that
Reddit will fucking...
the first boss of Sanctum, he used to explode on death, and yeah, it was bad, right? Like, how do you know until it happens, and then by the time it happens, you're dead, and of course, you kill the boss, you run in to get the loot. That's just what you do.
Debated.
So that one is an example of one where it were like, well, I mean, whether or not you could say it was telegraphed well enough, I don't know. It kind of just didn't really work. So there are clear examples where we've removed them because, yeah, it was kind of bullshit. And then there are probably a few examples that are in the grey right now, and probably even some that are still bullshit, and we still do need to address them 100%. That being said, again, not philosophically against them, just philosophically against unfair or like gameplay that's, again, I agree, if you're just covering the monster and loot labels, let alone anything else, and it's about to explode, that is a bad thing. Like 100% that needs to be addressed.
Sorry, I think we...
So yeah, I guess it's just more a matter of like, make sure that you continue to make us aware of the things that feel terrible to play against, and we'll do what we can to fix them, and if we can't get a good solution, then it probably will be removed. Like, that is often what happens eventually.
Fair enough. I have a kind of a different topic here. So there was a specific question related to ascendancy skills. So some ascendancy skills, I believe, have like quality effects, but you can't quality them. And ascendancy skills also can't be put into weapon slots. So like you can't use weapon switching with ascendancy at the moment. I can't put like Elemental Storm or something for some reason you want to use that. It's like by only using my second weapon, for instance. So they're wondering if in 0.2 we can see quality coming to ascendancy and weapon swapping, actually being able to be queuable onto ascendancy skills.
My bad.
Well, you can't put quality on them because they're not items, but the reason why they still have quality is because there are things that give quality to all skills.
Oh, it's good. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I believe that's why it's like that. So we're not going to change the fact that you can add quality to them because they're just not items, so it just works that way. As for the weapon swap thing, can you not open up the advanced skill thing and turn the usable way weapon set 1 and 2 for ascendancy skills? I thought you would be able to do that. Is that really not possible?
No, I checked it yesterday.
Remember. And you can't do that?
No, not that I've seen. No. Man, let someone correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
I have a feeling now. So that actually surprises me. But now, upon thinking about it, I suspect I know why, and it will be a stupid technical limitation due to the way that information is stored, where there's no place in your character to store it. So I can actually probably get that fixed now that you've brought that to my attention. It just wasn't something that I was really aware of. I can actually get that fixed. Probably not for 0.20, but that's a relatively easy fix. And as I said, it's because currently the place where that's stored is in the gem, and because there's no gem there, there was no place to store it. So probably it just ended up getting disabled by whoever implemented that. I can get them to fix it.
Great.
All right. We'll move over to some critical strike question. It's about critical strike bonus on weapons, which is currently multiplicative, with other sources of crit bonus leading to higher crit multi than we've ever had, even in PoE 1. So the question is if there's any changes or plans of changes to that, or is crit supposed to be that strong in the endgame?
I wouldn't say that crit has been first on our mind with regard to the changes we've been making on balance. Like, that isn't to say that there isn't something wrong with it, but it hasn't exactly been jumping out at us as like, oh, they've got this big problem with crit. The big problems have been other things. So, I wouldn't say that we certainly haven't made any changes there. As for whether or not it should be like this, I think that'll be a question that will start to come up once we actually have that jumping out as a problem, if it does. Our intention was... Okay, so just to be clear, though, about why we made that change, because we want it in general that items are always multiplicative with everything else. Like, it's supposed to be that your tree is multiplicative with your items. So, therefore, whenever that's not the case, that's kind of a defeat. Like, we want it, that's just our general philosophy. So ideally we have it that way for as long as we can. If we then run into an issue, maybe we'd change it, but we haven't run into we haven't noticed any particular issues yet with that, so we'll just leave it that way for the time being. The concern would be, of course, is if every weapon build is playing crit characters, which, I mean, like, I don't know if it's the case right now. It possibly is the case, but I don't know if you've got any other feeling about that.
Every, I mean, a lot.
Right.
I mean, this is ironically just like the eternal battle we had in PoE 1 of crit versus non-crit.
Right.
And we did like a million changes over time, and we're effectively just starting that battle again. The good thing is, because we've done that, we know exactly what we would have to do, which is there is almost certainly just an imbalance in the ease of getting chance relative to the amount of crit damage you can get. There's no way that is just like right on the get-go. So, but however, it's not on the certainly the current. I wouldn't say it's not on the radar. It's more that it's not the most imminent thing for us to be fixing, given how much we have to be addressing right now, and which we're actively doing as we speak. So, well, other people are actively doing as we speak. So yes, I would expect changes, but I don't know if that will necessarily change for 020. That being said, everything's changing at like a base level, or a lot is changing at a base level, such that this will obviously. It's not like these builds are going to be identical in power after this, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a multiplier. What it does allow you to do is get so much burst glass cannony that, again, you're just evaporating the bosses in such an insanely small amount of time that you can turn that battle into not a battle, and that is a problem that might still remain. And if so, we'll fix it. If the base things that are pre-crit multiplier are also addressed to enough of a degree, at least the boss fight will last long enough that all of a sudden your glass cannon nature might reveal itself as a weakness. We'll have to kind of just see how that plays out, but I would say there's a 99% chance that we're going to have to change something, but I don't know if we can do it in 020. At least specifically to do with the disproportionate amount of crit damage you're getting. And we might still, by the way, I won't say that we're not. I'm just going to say that there is still technically 2 or 3 days left. So,
and patch notes for Thursday in New Zealand time, so a little bit time left. Another question we have is actually again about scaling, and it's about de-leveling of skill gems. If this is something you'll reconsider allowing us to have that tool accessible. An example of this, I believe this was Fubgun's question. A lot of current builds will currently use a low-level spirit gem because the attribute requirements level 20 can be too high. An example provided was Deadeye using a low-level cast on shock as an example.
Well, a couple of things about this. One of them is that in general, we don't want people to want to use lower-level gems. Now, the requirements in terms of mana is a valid reason for that to be that they want to do it lower, or mana or spirit cost or whatever it is, so that's I suppose that's reasonable, but. I guess the way we initially thought that was solved, the reason why we were okay to remove down leveling is because you could just get a new, level 19 gem at any time. It's just that it's the quality that doesn't move over, so I guess that's the reason for the request.
It's more that people want, level 8, and they don't want to have to go back to some random...
You don't have a level 8 gem just lying around?
Not always. I
assumed it was the quality.
Certain levels that are just you want that exact thing, and then they're ultra annoying to get. But the intention was that every gem is worth... you should want to level up every gem no matter what, and the fact that some aren't, the fact that you're getting so much power out of using lower level ones is an error, and one that I would address rather by saying that having such a low level version of it at in-game should make the gem way worse. It shouldn't be good. It's just that a lot of these things don't have scaling over the levels.
Right.
There's a lot of problems that have. I mean, you even see this in things like curses, where it's the mana cost skyrockets and the attributes, but the power, it doesn't go up too much.
Mana cost is a big issue.
And so you end up with a bunch of low-level stuff everywhere. And I would say all of those are failures in that regard, and we should be making the level of them way more significant.
You shouldn't want a low-level gem, but in the case, I do have some sympathy in the case where I leveled this to 20 and I actually wanted it 19, right? I totally understand that that desire. And it's really only the quality that would be a barrier there for that particular case. But if you're telling me that people are wanting actually level 8 or something, then that's not right.
There are some valid reasons, and then there are some things where it's been designed or balanced poorly. And there's going to be a combination of fixing as to whether or not we then we need to revisit, I guess, whether or not we want to allow people to D-level uncuts or something like that. I don't know.
But
I mean, neither do I. But
it is definitely a design consideration for every skill we design of making sure that the levels matter enough. And like there was quite a lot of work in this direction because that was a big problem in PoE 1 that you had with quite a lot of things. So yeah, we do try and make the levels matter more.
I think one of the the primary concerns, and you touched on it a bit there, and it was a topic for later, but I suppose this is a good segue into it, is mana cost on abilities. Like for instance, 1 mana left at 22,000 mana, Spark costs 700, but then you had Hammer of the Gods, and it costs 1,180. So I suppose some of the questions would be like, how do you guys feel about mana costs of certain abilities and how it deprioritizes the suffix of like bonus levels specifically on classes like Warrior that already have reduced max mana on the tree for some reason. So what are you guys' feelings on the current state of like mana costs in relation to that?
Well, the few rules or things that we had before discussing what some stuff we've changed is that it was intended that obviously the cast time of this, the lower the cast time, the faster the cast time, the lower the cost is for one. Hence why something like Spark is relatively low. And then there was like a how frequently should you be using this, which is understandably somewhat subjective by us, but it is our design goal of how frequent. Now, not every skill fell into that correctly. So a good skill there, for example, is like Toxic Growth, was meant to be way more of a like occasionally you use this and then you work a little bit to blow up the pods. Now in reality at endgame it's you use it inside a gas arrow and the pods explode it literally in 0.1 seconds. Right? So you end up just doing gas cloud spam. That's just like one example where it's like this skill is now being used as a spammable and not being used as the infrequent thing that we wanted it to be used at. Now when it was infrequent by our design it had a multiply the mana by 1.4 because that's how we expect to use it, and ideally it would be balanced around that. And then, so yeah, the goal here is now, okay, do we either change Toxic Growth's role or do we make it more into what we intended for it to be? Obviously, we're going to start with that direction, and then hopefully we can achieve that. And then if that fails, obviously, who knows? Whatever happens afterwards. That being said, that just explains why something like Hammer of the Gods has a much higher cost multiplier, so to speak, as the frequency in which you use it is much lower. And Spark's cast time is much higher. However, there was a few things that happened in the mana cost balancing. So, for example, when you were a spellcaster, there was a level of assumed plus gem level you had, because if you didn't have that, then all of a sudden you get +4 gem level and your mana cost skyrockets, and you're like, "What the heck? I can't even use my weapon or my skills because I'm running out of mana because I got some plus gem level." So we assumed at certain intervals of the game you had, say, up to +4 or something like that. But for attackers, because of the gem level, at least for stuff that isn't using flat damage, the gem level matters a lot less, and we didn't make the assumption you had any, which was an error. Because all of a sudden now you'll get like +3 projectile levels or something, and now your mana costs are out of control, and you're like, well, this sucks. Like you get probably like 40% more mana cost for 15% more, 20% more damage, and it's like this isn't proportional at all. So we have lowered all the attack mana scaling in 020 to account for the same amount or some amount of gem level. I think it's slightly less than spells. But it makes a pretty significant difference in game, because it's an exponential. Like it was like 12% per level. Now it's like 9% per level, which over 20 levels is like a pretty significant drop in mana costs. So yeah, there's a few things going on there where there were skills not being used as we had intended. I mean, you're talking about the 22k mana. That is a separate problem, which we're also addressing. Though you certainly are not going to be expecting to see mana in the same level it is right now. Given you had Mind Over Matter, people were getting way too much mana, whatever, whole different thing. Ingenuity, breach rings, and all that. And then, yes, you have... So anyway, what am I saying? Attack mana cost down at endgame, and then just explaining some of the philosophy and how some skills aren't used as intended. And ideally, over time, we'd be either adjusting their mana costs because the role they now play is spammables, or we would or more spammables, or we would change the skill of the design or the build of the archetype to have it that the skill is actually being used at our intended frequency.
Got it. Okay. Well, I heard the tax skills costless mana, and that makes me a happy warrior.
Yeah, that's the actual takeaway, and also nerfed mana and nerfed ingenuity.
W, dude.
I think everyone knew that one was coming, so fair enough. Okay, so one of the most common questions, and trying to think of how to word this, but basically it boils down to this. One of the most common things people ask about, they want us to ask you, was about the pacing of the game. They see abilities added, like leaping backwards. They see parry being added. We see monsters that have exceptionally high movement speed and some slower cast animations from the player side of things, and mobs being able to push you around, etc. So I think kind of where people are going with this is, where do you guys see in your perfect world the in-game pacing of Path of Exile at? Obviously, it's not going to be the Gym Lean Stat Stacker, stuff like that's getting destroyed, right? That's not the intended pacing of the game, but how much faster than campaign? What's your philosophy behind the pacing when you're developing abilities, like we see with the Huntress with leaping backwards and stuff like the pushing of the mobs and the fastness of the mobs seem to outscale your pacing of the player?
Well, I always, this is sort of one of those questions that we get all the time and asked in different ways and so on. And it's like, it's always very hard for me to answer because I'm not sure what,
the mobs get way too fast.
Like I can't exactly give you the speed in, miles an hour, right? Like it's sort of hard it's hard to sort of quantify exactly what we're talking about. And I guess that's why I always tend to fall back on the feeling of like, okay, well, we want you to feel like you're always getting power growth. But we still want combos to matter, like these kinds of things. Like it's all those really design philosophy things. One thing I will say is that I heard from someone, and then it made me think about whether or not there was a concern that, like, from what we talked about in the Ziggy interview, because we talked about like nerfing a lot of things and like how that was all happening, right? And then we had someone who said to us, it's someone internal testing. They're like, oh yeah, I'm playing in game in 0-0, and the pace feels exactly the same as how it felt in 0-1-0. And the thing is, and they're talking about some random build that's like not some crazy broken meta build. It's just a rando build, right? And it's like, well, yeah, if you're a rando build, then like the pace isn't really changing. And I just want to make sure people understand that like we're not.
It might even be increased.
Well, in some cases, sure. Like, like if you're not playing the like ridiculously broken shit, it is in fact pretty similar to
the
before.
crossbow builds are getting buffed for sure.
But
I
like,
said that.
So long as the engagement of making sure the combat is engaging is ultimately our goal. And so it's like, yeah, it's the bosses take a little bit of time to kill, and then you have to engage with their mechanics and like all that sort of stuff. And like that's the only way that we would ever look at it, right? So
I can hit you with a little bit more of a specific to make it a little easier to answer then. So I think it's kind of two questions mixed together, and the more specific side of it is mobs being able to push you as a player.
Sure.
It's kind of a new addition. You got the rolling mobs that can hit you and move you halfway across the map. Where's your guys' stance on this? You know what I mean? It's been a common question.
Well, that's a different question. I don't. Okay,
well, there are specific issues with the old roly-poly monsters because they're not meant to just take you freaking for the ride all the way along. They're meant to just like shunt you to the side.
Right. So I think that's more of a case of fixing those specific things.
I think those are fixed now. Well, as in 0-2. I think. I hope, please, but the system seems to be quite volatile in a way where it likes to.
Well, I mean, even we had that issue with. I feel like did we even fix? The lumberjack guy at the start of the game. The Miller. Because that for a while in 0-2-0, that was just like randomly taking you for a ride.
Yeah.
I think is that
is a volatile system.
Yeah.
You change nothing, and for some reason now all the monsters are taking you for rides across the level, and then
sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, look, we don't want it to feel like you're just as I said, getting taken for a ride when you're not supposed to be. And so that one, ideally we're fixing cases where that occurs. Now, the reason you want a little bit of impact from monsters is just because it makes you actually feel the abilities, and there are monsters that feel if they don't have a push on their abilities, they feel just terrible. Like, I mean, there's things like the Devourer where like until we added the like pushback on the hit, it just felt like it wasn't even hitting you really. So there's stuff like that that's just really important just from a physical nature. So generally speaking, for the pushiness, we're trying to just make it so it feels physically correct. But yeah, we don't want it like pushing you half across the map, as you said. But yeah, and then the other part, I guess you were talking about maybe was to do with the abilities, that kind of like where the character's moving.
Oh, the other part of it, your characters get shoved a lot, and it feels like the pushing is a new concept for a lot of players, and where is its placement in maps? I get the Devour argument, where it's like, okay, it's a Devour, it's a big impactful hit. You earlier on, I get it, but then when you get to like in-game mapping, it starts to feel a little weird when you got these little mobs that are way faster. They're also like kind of shoving you around a little bit.
Right. I suspect that might be a case of certain monsters just not having correct adjustment. I mean, like, I'd be interested to know a specific example, because I mean, so you've got stuff like those werewolf prowlers, right? Where it's like when they attack you, they do a little push there. And once again, it feels like from just a mass perspective that feels all right. But I guess I could imagine a scenario where, because your character is moving so fast, at end game, that you might get into a situation where that push might feel a bit off. So, like I can kind of see where you're coming from in some of those cases. So, I mean, maybe we do need to do some adjustment to some of those monsters based on level or something like that. I don't know.
I think also when you have, there will be monsters that are wrong that don't appear as much in single player as well. I mean, this is just on top of that, because you won't know they're wrong until they're not only trying to attack you, they're trying to attack something behind you. And all of a sudden you're getting moved by something that you don't like. Probably, again, it could occur in minion cases, kind of summoning cases. Right. Or in multiplayer, it certainly happens. Yeah, I mean, there's no way that all the monsters have the correct pushiness value, so to speak. So
right. That's but I mean, it's good to get that as a thing to specifically focus on, because like it's something that probably would need some attention. We just need to get someone to like do an audit specifically thinking about that.
It requires, for some reason, a quite difficult eye for detail, because again, you want it to feel physically correct and make sense from a physical perspective. And I don't know, I found it quite hard to find someone who can actually assess what would happen if this werewolf jumped on you.
I can do it.
I can do it. There is stuff like that, which, I mean, sure, maybe it is kind of difficult, but yeah, we need to go over it with a fine-tooth comb.
I do think the context, though, of like when you're, because I mean, normally when a monster is being set up, it's being tested in isolation, and you're not necessarily using like a crazy fast build on it, right? You're just like playing it in the context of the era originally appeared in, like that is to say during campaign, when you don't necessarily have like some this like crazy move speed and all that stuff. So I suspect that the interpretation actually probably would change a little bit in the presence of having that sort of faster play that you get as your stats increase. I think it is something we should look into and like do it, recontextualize it with the idea that we should be looking at it from with high level builds in mind.
There's some.
Sure.
So I suspect there might be something. I think there might be something there. Yeah.
That works. We can move on. Okay, so the next portion here is kind of around ailments. So ailments in particular scale off of on hit, which means the ailments very often ends up feeling not so much as a build in and of itself, but as additional damage to a build. So the question would be, and I have a couple of specific questions as follow-ups here, is where do you guys see ailments placed in Path of Exile? Do you want to see, like, I'm doing a bleed build, or do you want to more see it as bleed as additional damage to a build I'm already doing?
Well, I personally, when I'm designing, I'm looking more about the combo potential of ailments and what they can do for other abilities. But that being said, ideally, we're in a situation where both of these things can be true, where it can be that you're playing a bleed build, but also then someone else might be playing a build that's relying more on consuming the bleed to do something else. And there's like a few different approaches you can take with it. Ideally, it's like, we can get all of these situations to be true depending on how you spec your character. It was intentional to make it so that the ailments depend more on the original hit, and I guess, so why did we do that?
A lot of that is somewhat, to me, intuition, right? Like, there's a little bit of a confusing level where you're like, I got the skill that applies a bleed, and I'm going to increase my damage, and it happens to say increase damage with hits. And, like, I don't know if anyone at that time is thinking that, oh, this is a hit, and the bleed isn't a hit, even though it's applied by the hit. Like, there's a level of just like unnecessary complexity that occurs there, where it's like, it's nice to just have more damage is more damage, and it affects both, and that's just like nice on some level. Like, that is certainly helpful. But I think also part of the problem is, like, you want the thing where if you take increased attack damage, for example, like, that isn't that affects your damage over time is applied by those attacks, right? Like you get, again, you don't want all this like really, you have to take global damage and you can't take kind of certain types of damage and you have to work your way around it and know all this like hyper specialized details about which stats work and which stats don't. And looking at that from like just a new player, or not even new, from probably people who have hundreds if not thousands of hours into the game are probably still uninformed unless they've read a specific thing explaining how it works. So
that's to say in PoE 1, right?
In PoE 1, yeah.
Whereas in PoE 2,
PoE 2, it should just be if you increase your damage, if the hit is harder, then the bleed applied by the thing is going to do more damage. That is certainly an upgrade. However, there isn't exactly a design goal to say, no, you can't be a build that's like hyper bleeding or igniting or anything like that. And whether or not those are entirely supported or supported enough is obviously people's opinion, or maybe not necessarily opinion, but like, there's no specific goal to not go one way or the other. We just wanted to make sure that you can, if you increase the damage of the hit, the ailment applied by that hit is doing more damage.
Makes sense. I think where the feedback ends up coming from is you're increasing the damage of the hit. So by the end of it, you're not really playing an Ignite build because you like Ignite the element. You're playing a Hammer of the Gods build. You know what I mean? That's applying the Ignite. That's, I think, the end result of where scaling the hit comes from.
Well, the Hammer of the Gods bleed thing isn't exactly something that that we're like in love with, just as a side note.
Something is needed to be done. Something is needed about that. I really don't want to do the whole like 80% less damage with ailments and all the skills and all that. I feel like it's all a bit tacky. It should be, but honestly, I don't even know an alternate solution right now, and we need to delve into it. So, there's probably a way around something like that. But yeah, you're right.
It is unfortunate that Hammer is the best way to do a bleed. Like it is counterintuitive and not amazing.
And an ignite.
Yeah.
I mean, it weaves back to what we had talked in our previous Tavern Talk, specifically about ailments, where how the thematical approach of the harder you hit, the harder the consequence of that hit becomes in form of an ailment, right? And we talk about ignition, we talk about bleed and all those things. But at the same time, we also put the players in the boat where we now are starting to scale, or we have the perspective of thinking, why would I stop scaling that on-hit damage if I have to stop scaling my on-hit damage to do more ailment damage? Why can't I just continue scaling that on-hit? And then you have these outliers like Hammer of the God, for example. Whereas in PoE 2, there's like separate ways of scaling. If you want to scale ailments, then the on-hit is kind of meh in comparison, but now your build is actually focused on ailments. So like you guys want to get to that point where there's actual full focus.
That might just be a matter of making sure that the increases to ailments are more effective than the increases to hits. In that case.
Yeah.
I think in general,
I mean, it is the case, but they might need to further do that.
I don't think in a way that would mathematically make it more beneficial overall.
Speaking as a bleed gamer,
we might just need to fix that.
Yes.
Some are intuitive in PoE 2, but they feel better in PoE 1.
So basically what you guys were talking about... basically what you guys were talking about was that you wanted hard hits to apply this. It's the same thing we talked about in the last Tavern Talk. I was just curious to see if the plans are to find another venue to actually make ailment builds possible contenders in the game, because they feel kind of lackluster outside of what we just talked about.
Part of the issue is as well as the goal, and an achievable goal at that, where it's like, well, why do anything else? Well, why not do the ailment if you can have that? You start the fight, you drop your Hammer of the Gods, and now the fight's over, because it plus the ailment is enough to kill the boss from full life. All of a sudden, the cooldown of the skill is irrelevant, which is meant to be the major downside as to why it's allowed to deal so much damage. And so as long as you can do that, like if it did 10% of the life of the boss and the ailment did another 10%, this wouldn't be such a problem in the context of Hammer of the Gods, because all of a sudden, you've done 20% of its life. Like that's a decent chunk of damage. But just because of the fact that there is the capability to get it to be so high damage that it will just one-shot them again, and crit is part of this problem as well. Then why would you not do that? You don't need to spec into any defense or anything else at all, right? You don't have to care.
True.
So yes, there's like part of a problem where this is where I'm just like, how much of this is just nerf Hammer of the Gods because that's how it's played?
Well, I mean, it isn't even... I mean, I feel like at some point you just want to put cannot create ailments on Hammer of the Gods.
Well, yeah, but we always try.
I know,
find
we try
ways
not.
around
At some
more
point.
arbitrary
But the more we have
restrictions
this conversation, I'm just kind of
well,
becoming
that's what I
more
was saying
convinced.
before. As opposed to
20
cannot
paragraphs.
apply, you put 80% less, and
Well, I feel like cannot apply is just
oh,
cleaner,
they both
right?
they both suck.
They do, but at least cannot apply is just like it's just a clean rule. This is what it is, and they're kind of done. You know, like as soon as you start getting, I don't know. I feel like the 80% thing.
I
is-
know it's on the list right now of
Stage,
things we
bro.
still have to discuss in more detail. So
Right.
and I mean the today/tomorrow list. So well,
Speaking of the list and ailments, I am curious because we also had this conversation in the last Tavern Talk podcast, and that was bleed on ES. And it was the contradicting
Yeah,
line.
we were
the
wrong.
idea.
This is
Yeah.
my question,
Okay.
and
We were
you
wrong.
were wrong. Yeah.
well, there was a few things we
Mark?
did change around that. I'm still not entirely happy with it, but it was a decision we actually made. I remember being like, okay, you can't bleed things with ES, which actually is the case. You can't bleed things
Yeah.
with energy shield.
Yeah,
It has to be damage to life that causes the bleed.
Yes.
And there's some reason for that. I can't remember why.
Was it a dumb technical reason or like an actual design reason?
I
Come
don't
on, bro.
remember.
Yeah.
But and I was like, what the? There's no way it works that way. And we were talking about how we were gonna make sure it isn't the case. And we were just wrong. And then it was like, yeah, you guys decided this. And I was like, oh. And then I had flashbacks to crazy discussions we had. And yes, indeed, we did decide that. Now, all that being said, there were some extreme cases of energy shield on monsters where it was like,
Yeah. Check the Reddit post.
the way it was working is the map mod was like, 25%, and then it would multiply with all the life modifiers that unique monsters have, and it's like, okay, now the monsters have legit 2.5 times the amount of energy shield that they have life, or like 1.5 times, so that, you know, there's a million life, they have 1.5 million energy shield. And it's like, well, that's of course just terrible. I think we've changed all of that since, so at least
Updated
like
the it's me.
now when it says they have 20% energy shield, it is at least their final life multiplied by 1.2, or 0.2 and added as energy shield. So at least like there's a lot less to deal with there. Now I'm not entirely sure if I'm happy with the fact it works this way and it is just a nice downside for bleed builds, or if it's like, well, this is just annoying because of, I don't know. I don't quite know how I feel. I like
Oh
it
my
in some
God.
regards, and
I
then in
don't
others, I
really
can see
have
why it's frustrating is the thing. But at least we've fixed the freaking energy shield problem, which is just things having all of the energy shield. But I do like the idea that monsters with energy shield have it is a weakness to a bleed build. Now, whether or not it is a balance warranted weakness is a different story, because you could argue that that isn't factored into bleed's power. But yeah, I'm not quite sure where I
bleed,
sit
man.
on this one, to be honest now. But we did address the energy shield problem, at least to the major degree.
All right, so one more last question regarding ailments before we move on, and that is actually regarding Ignite proliferation. It feels very short. The radius isn't very long. Are you guys happy with the current state of proliferation effects of ailments such as Ignite?
I don't even remember the radius. Too many numbers. I honestly can't say I have enough familiarity with this to even be able to give you an answer as to whether or not I am happy. So I guess the real thing is, if players are unhappy, then there's probably a change that needs to be made, right? So if that is the case, I'd have to look into it, honestly. Which wouldn't take me long. It would take me like 10 minutes. I just need to refamiliarize myself with it. But obviously not in this
Why
moment.
am I missing when I'm
I believe the radius is nearby, so that would be, in this case, 1.2 meters, I think it is, or 2 meters or something. It's very, very short. That's why I had to bring it up. Well, let's move on from ailments. And one of the questions we have was cross-weapon skills. Are there any intentions in making skills be able to be used with multiple weapon types?
Generally speaking, no, because we see the skills that you use with your weapon as being like innate to what it means to use that weapon, and that was like a major difference between PoE 1 and PoE 2. So yeah, the plan is to keep that. I mean, that being said, there's still a few skills. I mean, you know, things like marks and stuff like that. You know, we just have them work across things. But generally speaking, no, the skills are supposed to be associated with the weapons.
There'll be like unique item territory that might bend the rules there a bit, but
Sure.
Otherwise, yeah, wanting the skills and the weapons to be quite linked was one of the main design goals of PoE 2, and having that different weapons feel different from one another when they can be quite melded into the same concept in PoE 1, where it's almost like it doesn't really matter if you're using one or the other necessarily. It's just a matter of what gives you the highest DPS.
So next question on the list, which we touched on just briefly here previously, about boss spawn rates. So you said that you've increased also the rate that you're going to see monsters, or I should say bosses, be accessible. Does that include things like Audience for a King and their drop rates in like Ritual?
That is explicitly what I'm talking about. So that is the Twisted Domain, is that what it's still called? The rate of which Olroth appears, the Audience with the King frequency, and Simulacrum frequency.
Big W then. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll follow that question up with the current boss drops. There's going to be 100 uniques being added to the game. Will some end up being boss-specific ones? And are there any changes to what items the endgame bosses can drop currently?
So we're not adding new boss-specific drops to bosses that already existed, but there are some of those uniques are boss-specific for new content that we're adding. But the intention though with the uniques is not to be add a bunch of boss-specific stuff. Mostly, it's to add a bunch of stuff to the core drop pool, which is what needs, it, I think. So that's most of them are core drop pool.
So with the addition of 7 new maps, I believe is what you said, is coming to the game as well, has there been any retuning or touching of the previous maps? And the follow-up to that would be, are there any plans to have something like a Horizon Orb, or potentially you could change one map into another? So if you see one that's like an Augury, you can change to a Val Factory or what have you.
So we haven't done that. There's been probably a few touch-up to maps, but I would say it hasn't been the major focus of 020. But I do think it's going to be a much more of a focus than 030, that we want to try and improve the mapping experience of just the core maps by quite a lot. That'll be more of a thing we do then.
We had a huge discussion about this the other day.
Yeah.
I think we did briefly talk about it in the Q&A with Ziggy, but like effectively there are just some maps that are just like, very mundane. There's not a lot going on, and so part of this was also, okay, well, at least adding all this new content like the Exiles and the Wisps and stuff will alleviate the level of things not going on in certain bad maps. We had a pretty massive discussion about how we could improve it. We just need to do it, and there's no way we were going to do that in time. So 030, I guess, is our current objective there.
Another Atlas question regarding maps. Sometimes they're broken. Like there are map nodes that are 100% out of reach. Is this addressed in point 2?
There's been we told the person who works on that to fix it. They said that there was improvements. So as far as I know, it should be fixed.
There are improvements to the full, like, I can't exit at all. Like you're in this block and you're like, I literally can't escape this island. I don't think I think there will still be just like very rarely random disconnected maps that you can't get to. Because that is technically less problematic than the people who are literally unable to play the end game because they're trapped. The other thing that we've done, a very recent, which I checked yesterday, was a pretty drastic improvement, is just there's like bits that are just improving the general connectivity between blocks. The concept of a block is probably not very observable to a player, but effectively you'd get these like kind of lines where it's like, I can't map across this entire section. There's 0 connections. That's like kind of because it's a gap between what we call blocks, and we've increased the connectivity between those like dramatically. There is one bug left, which I don't think we're going to fix in time, which is currently a node is only meant to have a total of 4 in and out connections. And I think once they get more than 4, one of them, they look like they have 5, but only one of them will just straight up not work. This is a bug. We are going to fix it. I just think it might go out with that bug. It's already on live, that problem, where sometimes you're like, I've completed this map and it connects to this one, but I can't get there. And that's because it has more than 4 total lines. We just need to fix that. So it's just that person has been excruciatingly busy. So if it's not there immediately, it'll be there shortly after.
Good to hear. A more sought-after topic, it was regarding trade improvements, which was mentioned in the Destin interview. My question
I don't have anything
mind
extra to say about
some
this.
More details?
I don't
it?
have anything
Okay.
extra to say about this.
Okay.
All right, so then moving on to crafting here. So we're hoping you could walk us through the process of coming upon the solution as Recombinators to be the next addition you guys wanted into the game.
Well, effectively, we were looking for things
Shut the
that
fuck
could
up, bitch. Shut the
increase
fuck
the
up.
ability for there to be more interesting stuff you could do.
And give each league its own crafting.
And give each league its own crafting
Yeah.
mechanism. And I mean, recombination is something that kind of like is sort of well, I should say multiplicative with kind of other things that go on with mods, because it sort of allows you to do some interesting stuff
and utilizes
there.
ground items. In a
Yeah,
good
and
way.
utilizes ground items in a good way. Boxes as far as like what we need a crafting system to do. Today I'm actually going to be going, because we had that last minute change of how we wanted it to work, and so today I'm going to be going through the math of that pretty significantly. That's my plan for after this podcast. So
Dude, what a fun
we'll
job
see
we
how
did
that
to
one turns
balance
out after
PvE
this.
and
But
stuff.
effectively, you know, like recombination will change I think its role a little bit from PoE1, because it'll be more about getting the good set of like 3 to 4 you know, like 2, 3, 4 kind of mods that you want on an item, and then going from there with the exalting the remaining. So you know, like that's kind of the intended like place where it kind of ends up being most useful for you. It isn't going to be something that you are going to make a perfect, you know, like 6T1 item with, because like the percentage chance will just become infinitesimal to the point of like not being worth even trying. So really it's more about those like a smaller number of mods that you can definitely pick, and then like hoping to get do well with the remaining 2. So yeah, that's sort of the value. But ultimately, it's that sort of stuff where we need our crafting systems to work well with ground items, and you know, to fit into the to be multiplicative with other crafting that you can do, and you know, having it be on a system that on a league that didn't have crafting as well was a big bonus too.
I mean, we have so many more other ideas and other things we do, and all of that with future leagues, future content, and expansions to the ones we already have. And it's just going to be a matter of like, you know, we want to do at least for now give Expedition 1, because like the vendor thing is there, but it's not really like achieving. It's not really equivalent to the others where they have like, again, an external crafting system that interacts with like dropped items or something like that. So adding that means at least now they all have something, and then now it's either make them better or add new ones, which there's no shortage of ideas of things we want to actually do there. So
Fair enough. We have another question we got from the community as well, and that is regarding your stance or plans for like resistance swaps, craftable option. Is that something you guys want to see in the future of the game?
Sorry, what was that word? I missed it.
Resistance.
Resistance swap.
Well,
Swapping
it is
similar to like Harvest in PoE1.
it's meant to be the roles of runes. Like your runes are meant to be the thing that's doing that, as opposed to just changing the mods on explicit items like that. The context there, I don't know if you're I remember aware, but there is a harvest craft in PoE1 that allows you to change a cold to a lightning or a cold to a fire, etc. In the resistance thing.
Yeah, that really is what runes are for.
Next question we have is actually starting to touch on Ascendancy specifically, and we have starting with the Amazon, and there's a node called Critical Strike, and it's referring to additional crit strike chance from 25% of excess chance to hit. The real question here is rather, is this going to be like a base crit strike chance or increased critical strike chance to the player?
It's base grip.
I would assume that
we think it's base.
Probably base, but honestly, I'd have to ask someone specifically about that.
I'll leave my own deck.
Like I don't know the actual answer, but it's probably base.
Getting more and more a chance to, because the chance to accuracy has diminishing returns, so it gets harder and harder and harder to get higher values. So I should, in theory, be okay to be adding as base, because could get quite aggressive the fall off there. So I believe it works that way. But this is the exact kind of thing where someone might have been like, oh my god, this is unacceptable and imbalanced, and we have to change how it works to be some kind of final value or something, and if which the description will be updated and it will be made clear, but that might have happened literally as we've been doing this for all we know. So as far as we know, last it worked, it was adding just a base critical strike chance that then gets scaled with increases.
All right. The other node is also from Amazon, and that is Penetrate. This is referring to having attacks adding 25% of the accuracy rating on the weapon's added base physical damage. Question here is simple. Is it going to be added as a local damage modifier that will then be scaled with the weapon's mods, or is it just an added flat number on top of the total damage?
I don't think it adds it to your weapon. I just don't think it would work that way. Because I don't even think the stat is phrased that way. I think it's more that, like...
I think it's the same as if you got added physical damage on, like, a ring.
Right.
That's
I'm
fair.
pretty sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was most excited by when I saw the reveal was the Tame Beast. Kind of something I was not expecting to see when I saw it. And when I heard you guys talking about you had to, in the Ziggy D interview, you had to change some of the affixes. It got me curious. Did you guys run into any scenario where some of the affixes you thought would be, absolutely busted, like invulnerability aura or et cetera? What was some of the cases you ran into?
Yes, 100%. What other ones? There's definitely some that were, but I think
the
that,
temporal bubble
that
was
one in
another
particular was pretty crazy. Yeah, I mean, we've had to do things where we had to reduce the uptime on some of them and like, change how frequently they use them. But on the other end, we've also taken the mods that would have been really, really bad at killing monsters and made them a lot better as well. So it should be a bit more uniform, but yeah, it's certainly a kind of... Well, on top of that, I mean, aside from being a difficult balance task, there's also like just making sure it's not annoying when you're like AK or looting. It's not like, doing things too... I mean, one problem you're gonna face, which I want to address, I just don't know how to do it imminently, is the fact that you might often see those things coming out. Like, for example, if your rare monster has periodic fire explosions mod, like you can't distinguish those from enemy ones, and you might all of a sudden be avoiding your beast's mods all the time. Now, a lot of people are probably just gonna be like, oh my god, don't tame a beast with that mod. Fair enough. I do want to actually alleviate that and do like Asmerian versions of all those effects so that you can at least distinguish them apart. Put some wispy stuff or change the color of it a little bit. But for now, like, yeah, that's kind of a lot, and we didn't get time to do that. So that will happen, just as a forewarning. That being said, it obviously doesn't damage you. Well, actually, it did at one point. It won't. It won't damage you.
Jesus.
We had that with specters as well, where there are some monsters like
Friendly
the ones
fire.
in the Ziggurat, where they like create like they send forward like a little sun orb, and it's like, oh yeah, that's just a normal projectile, right? And then the specters are using it, and all of a sudden it's killing you. And one of our audio guys found that the other day and was like, I'm getting killed by my own specters. I'm like, no, this is not the point in the pipeline. We should be finding this out. So hopefully there's no more of those going on, but be careful.
The funny, because the reason why the audio team
Early access.
is because the audio team have to do a whole pass on every monster for the case where it's your minion, because otherwise you get really annoying audio that's like 5 minutes a monster, but when they're next to you all the time, it's like really irritating. So it's like that's actually one of the things we had to do to make Spectres work was do a redo of the entire audio pass for that. So it's kind of a funny one.
All right, one last question for Tame Beast for you then. So it's a spear scale, obviously. It shows up on the spear scale screenshot you got there. Is it locked behind having the spear equipped? Is it the type of...
No, it's not. So you can just use it on any class. It's just there because it's associated with the Huntress. You can use it as any character.
Okay, that's pretty awesome then.
Amazing. Moving over to Ritualist, we have a couple of quick questions here, and I'll start with the first one. The extra ring slots, we saw the answer to this regarding Calandra's touch ring, not being able to copy it, but how will the extra ring slot interact with Ingenuity?
It just works with its nice new nerfed version.
This works.
Oh, and he's got deleted,
Gotcha.
bro.
There was a list of unique rings that had to we had to do specific implementation for, like Thief's Torment and random stuff. I don't know what state these are all in, and the can't use other ring slots stat, I should say. I can't remember the exact decisions that were made on all, but ideally they should just be the most intuitive thing. It's just they all needed pretty specific handling.
All right, so then the other question I had is a common question people were having was on the screenshot where you were showing the Ritual Sacrifice where you got the mods from the monster. It was stated as you get one of them, but then in the video you got
you actually get all,
That's gone through a whole bunch of balance. I don't know if you get all. I think you get four if you stab them and something if you stab yourself. There's some like I can't remember the numbers, but I want to see it again. It might change tomorrow. We do these live streams and it's not like we've stopped developing on the game. So yeah, you get little inaccuracies like that are just wrong, or that change in the last week or 2 weeks kind of thing. And it's not like we've written that thing literally 5 minutes before we did it. We're like preparing that thing for like a month. And so yeah, sometimes across that time you've recorded a thing and you don't want to have to re-record every single little thing, or you just miss a thing. And so yeah, you get little inaccuracies like that. But it is certainly not what it was represented as. So.
All right. We can move over to the tactician. And the first one is regarding the focus fire notable, basically where you attack, your totem starts attacking. We've seen this as it exists in PoE 1. It's not been very popular in PoE 1, so I wanted to ask what the differences are from the PoE 1 versions to the new version in PoE 2, if any.
It's because numbers aren't high enough.
I don't think it is different.
It's just numbers aren't high enough. That's it. So as long as it's good, people will use it.
I don't think it is different, and I don't disagree with you that it might have even been adjusted since, because I also, I'll go check that out after this, because I also don't disagree that it is on my list of I don't think this is actually very good. So,
Okay.
It might have already been addressed though.
Fair enough. The second tactician question we have is regarding the supporting fire minion. Now, can you elaborate on how this minion will actually function, as it states that they will trail you, but they will be literally off screen? And will this have an impact on them being within presence?
I have to tell you a secret. The minion doesn't really exist. They're not actually following you.
No!
It's just that there's effectively a skill being done.
It's got a Johnny mechanic where it scales with minion modifiers.
Exactly, right? Damage is dealt as if it was being done by a minion. But yes, the minions don't really exist. They're not really following you.
So this breaks they are not within presence then, because they would have to exist within your vicinity.
Exactly. Well, they're off screen, right? They're not.
They're outside the borders of the map.
Exactly.
Artillery.
Tactical nuke, bro.
All right.
No, we ruined the illusion.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so Smith of Katava, Temper Weapon. This one looks really interesting because based upon the way it works is depending on how much people are really going to use it. So we were kind of curious about how the Temper Weapon actually works, if there's more details. Is it a time period? It looks like he hits it 4 times and gets multiple attacks. So is it, do you want to give us more information about how Temper Weapon is going to work with that ascendancy?
I can't remember all the exact numbers because they probably have been changed, but effectively, yeah, it is.
I believe it's a number of attacks, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was meant to fulfill a role similar to Meditate, where it's like you do certain things, and in this case, it's meant to be, not like, I mean, you should be able to hit a few times and then get to use it for quite some time. Sure. Like, it shouldn't be just like a really annoying where it's like literally between every pack I got to be sitting there hitting my weapon, and
right.
But I believe, some number of hits of the weapon gives you a much greater number of actual fire explosions going off. So without all the numbers in mind, I can't really explain exactly what that balance is, because they would have changed since I last saw it anyway.
That works. There were some guesses on whether or not it was going to be duration or on hit. How many hits you get. Basically.
It's on hit though. It is on hit.
Okay, that answers that then.
Yeah. All right. Another note from the Smith of Kitava is Manifest Weapon, personal favorite of mine with Animate Weapon from PoE 1. Now, the question would be, how will this ability work? Is it reserving spirit? Is it copying your weapon? Could you elaborate on this?
It copies your weapon. Whether or not it is using spirit,
I don't think it uses spirit.
I don't think so. No,
it doesn't.
But yeah, it's a copy of your weapon. I think each different weapon type has a skill. So if it's a mace, it'll occasionally do a slam, and if it's a staff, it'll occasionally, quarterstaff, it'll occasionally do. I don't remember what all the skills are, but the idea is that it doesn't just melee attack only. It has like an extra ability it uses on periodically.
If you're dual wielding, do you get both weapons?
I don't remember. I think no. You probably just get your main hand. It's probably
that'd be cool though.
I mean, it would be, but technically that is way more damage. Unless you're saying it's one minion that attacks with both, in which case that would be cool. I'd have to have a look. In fact, it could. Maybe it is doing that. I actually, I don't know. I don't know.
What the fuck, man? Last question.
Often what happens there, just for context, we're involved in their initial design. We have it at hands off. That level of detail we won't necessarily figure out. You hand it off to a designer. A designer will come back a few times asking intermittent questions about it, and then sometimes you don't see it again, and that's fine. You test it on live, or you play it on live. Like, other people have seen it, you trust the process, it works. It's just that, like, it's hard to retain literally details about every single ascendancy node and all of that when you have so much going on. So
Sure.
I have one question I have to bring up from my friend Pox here. Since everyone's referring to Smith Okitava as the chieftain of PoE 2, are we getting RF soon?
Not you'll have to wait until the class that's most associated with is ready to come out. Unfortunately,
Fair
so
enough.
yeah, it won't be. It won't be the. Unfortunately, it won't be the next class either. Maybe the one a little bit further down the line, I think.
I had to ask.
All right, so last question we have for Smith of Katava is a pretty basic one. The Heat of the Forge skill looks kind of interesting, and there's some debate. Does it work on, like, every hit you're casting a skill, or is it basically energy gain, sort of like the cast on ignites, cast on shock?
I guess Mjolnir isn't out to talk about that right now, so I mean, I believe it's energy build up, very similar to how the arrest will work as well.
Just say it works the same as Mjolnir.
Yeah, but it's, I don't think that had been released.
Yes, I know.
So,
I'm just joking.
well, Mjolnir will work the same way, but lightning. That I know. Pretty sure it is like energy build up, but again, without knowing all the numbers, I can't exactly know the frequency in which things trigger and proc and whatnot. But it is like, yeah, look, it's going to be energy based, similar to, and so will Mjolnir, I guess. So.
Okay.
All right. We'll try to speed up a bit. We don't want to take you too much time like we did last time. So we'll move over straight to the Lich. Now, the first and big question I think most of us are having is regarding eternal life. Basically, when you read it, it more or less tells everybody you're going to be immortal. So could you elaborate on this will work?
Which one was that again? The names. Is that
your life? Life can't change if you have energy shield. So if you have like Cell of Soul, you have a little bit of energy shield regen. You're not gonna die. Mechanical stuff.
Obviously one shot you.
That you combine with modifiers such as Self-Dose, Eternal Youth, or Demon Stitcher, Serious Disdain. The whole list goes in terms of how that would operate.
What's there about this? I mean, we acknowledged it was powerful. That's for damn sure. So many mechanics around this. I mean, the name is fitting, I guess. I agree. I can't. We had a massive discussion about this and like figured out that it was strong, but maybe okay. Now whether or not we're right about that, we'll see. I don't know, again, without looking into this more and talking to people, I won't be able to get an exact answer. But like, look, we're not going to intentionally release something that makes you just actual god mode. So either people are now going to tell us about what we messed up, and we're going to go change something or counterbalance something, or you know, maybe there's some misconceptions about how it works or something like that, which we probably need to clarify. They again might have already addressed something to do with this as well. I'd have to have a look. I have certainly, since the thing, not been entirely like up to date on what ascendancy class changes have been happening, just because again there's too much other stuff going on. So.
Sure. Well, two quick questions.
You might be immortal, you might not be, as the summary of it. We'll see.
Hopefully, I would imagine you're not going to be fully immortal. I believe that it should be okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not just going to add that without some level of.
Yeah, there was a bit of a tip to the cap to it, I'm assuming, because they had like stitchers. When you showed the showcase, had stitchers he was wearing that Serious Disdain. So I'm like, okay, it's a bit of a inside nod to it, I suppose. Okay, so a couple questions here related to the other ascendancies. Conduit, when it says you lose 5% of mana per second, we're assuming that's current mana, or is that actually 5% of maximum mana?
Sorry, which one was that? Sorry.
Necromantic Conduit, where it says as a modifier where you're going to lose 5% of your mana per second is sort of the downside of that one there. So
I mean, if it doesn't say maximum, it should be current.
Got it. And then,
but I won't ever. Again, we're getting into like the level of specific that I am not able to stay entirely up to date on or informed of nowadays. But I'm pretty sure it would be current if it doesn't say maximum. But again, I will not say that there isn't just a mistake in the description, but we do have several people check all of that, so it should be current if it doesn't say max.
Gotcha.
Memorize the patch
well, the
notes
last
and
one we
tell
have
all
for
the
you on the
changes right
Synergy
now.
here, it's about the jewel socket, which looks pretty cool. You get the extra jewel socket, you go in the lich there. Can that be used with Adorn? Not putting Adorn in the socket, but does it calculate within?
Is it non-unique? I think it's non-unique jewels only, right?
Yeah, basic jewel. So it's the basic jewel that you put in there. Can the Adorn outside on the passive
can
tree
you do?
affect the jewel?
Good question. I want to say yes, but I don't know why I want to say yes. I feel like I want to say yes because that's probably what you'd expect, but that might have been handled if it was in a case that was unacceptable.
Man.
There's a good chance someone they would have tested that and found out one way or the other and made it either work or not. But intuitively, it should work. But again, it may have been handled already.
All right. We're gonna move on to some minion questions. First, we have the Asmerian Wisps with how they operate with a new mechanic for the O2. And I was curious how the radius of these would be affecting enemies, as we have enemy or minion builds, we have a non-minion builds that applies to killing enemies fast enough. Will these wisps actually have the time to affect the enemies before you reach them? Would that be an issue for minion builds and other builds like Deadeyes and whatnot?
They do move pretty fast when you're in front of them. So and they don't get blocked by monsters or anything like that. And the radius is relatively high, so I don't think it should be much of an issue. So I guess I would say just if we're tweaking those parameters correctly,
we've done a few things when the wisps start to possess, when they get in range of their target, they make their target unable to die, so that you can't kill it just as it's possessing it. There's a few little things like that, but yeah, they are pretty generous with it. I'm not going to say it's impossible. There's always going to be some kind of killing edge of screen. Well, hopefully not always, but there is always the possibility of that happening, and thus, yeah, you're going to be able to just obliterate things before it happens. But it's pretty difficult to do, honestly. At least you can't, unlike Torment Spirits, kill the spirit on accident to start with, so at least there's that. One step in the right direction. That being said, yeah, I'm not going to say it's impossible. It's obviously if you are extremely powerful and in an underleveled area, then there's a good chance you're just going to kill everything with a single tap. The moment it even not even approaches your screen. That being said, it should be that we've done enough to account for this. If we haven't, there is always more we can do to account for it. So we'll just have to see. But I'm pretty sure it's in a decent spot right now. Hopefully it won't be a problem.
So we have a question that's sort of a follow-up from one of the previous updates. Minions got an AI improvement around body blocking, and we were wondering if there's going to be any further AI improvements to body blocking in 0.2.
I don't think we've got anything else in 0.2. I think there wasn't anything else.
Yeah, not in 0.2.0.
Upgraded shield, baby. Let's go. She's about to block this guy now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that isn't.
I know the raised specters have a thing where because we don't if they get too far away, they become a spirit form and travel over to you and then reappear as the monster and stuff like that, so they don't have to even die and respawn when you get too far away. But there is an extreme case where that can still happen, but we do try and at least keep them from having to do that. That is also mostly because most monsters, if you start to speed up their movement speed, especially with the whole range of monsters, start to look ridiculously absurd. Whereas I guess with a skeleton you get away with it a little bit more, so you can be a little bit flexible. But in terms of the generic minions, no, I don't think we've changed anything else there yet. We did the 2 changes, right? It was the
when was that door thing we did?
We did that.
Was that? Is that in?
I'm pretty sure that's it.
Okay, right.
And what was the other main one we did? The whole if they get off screen, they immediately revive next to you.
So I don't think there's any other changes. If the thing was already done and deployed, then yeah, there isn't anything else in 0.2 for that.
A quick question is regarding minions in the early game, mostly referring to first 20 levels or so. For minions to be able to perform and feel like you're playing a minion build, the minions need to stay alive, and an 8-second revive timer whilst they're dying as soon as something looks at them in the wrong way in the first couple of levels is kind of a question that's being brought up several times. So the question is survivability of your minions in the early couple of levels something you've looked at?
I don't know that I see it currently as too much of a problem. I was actually playtesting minions last night, and I mean, one thing I will say is that the Witch probably has one of the easiest times in the early levels compared to many of the other classes overall.
That's fair.
At least in my opinion. So I don't know that I'm looking hugely to buff anything there right now. Yeah, I don't know. I sort of think it's sort of in an alright place in that regard.
Yeah. There's certainly nothing on the radar because it is true that the class doesn't exactly feel underpowered.
Right.
The question is whether or not there's maybe like a couple of bosses here and there that are maybe too punitive, or a couple of monsters, you know, that are too punitive to minions.
Well, the one that I noticed as I was playing in the very early game was just the ground, the on-death ground poisons. Are pretty
mushroom.
Yeah, the mushroom things are pretty ruthless against minions.
Yeah.
Just
Well, that is a. We do need to address a lot of those, because again, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd have, like not just stand in it.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, that's exactly the kind of case to do something about that specific, and there'll be a few more of those trickled throughout, and a few like there'll be one specific boss with one specific skill that is just like unfair, and 100% we need to keep adjusting all of those.
So the next one is sort of a report from the previous update, where it was a controller update for offering skills to make the targeting a little bit easier. Kind of the result of that was that offering skills are now auto-targeting like the lowest HP minion, you know, kind of making offering skills a little brutal there sometimes. So we're kind of wondering, is there any update for this in 0.2, or is it on the radar for future updates?
It's pretty hard to solve from a like controller versus non-controller standpoint there, without adding in like all these extra layers of what I would consider to be hopefully unnecessary UI. But I think
wasn't that support gem?
Yeah, we have the sacrificial lamb support. That's new, right? Which you can put on a minion, and it will now always make that minion a priority target for anything that targets minions. So you can chuck that on, like summon a couple warriors, chuck it on that, and now anytime you use an offering, they will be your priority target for those skills.
It's a solution.
Which pretty useful. It's pretty strong, honestly, with things like even DD and using sacrifice and all that. Like it 100% is like pretty strong right now. But yeah, it also, at the other hand, solves like honestly what I would express as a quality of life problem. So.
No, for sure. Speaking of warriors, why are they gone? In the footage, they were gone from the occult skill gems.
You know, I noticed that last night. I was going to ask you about that.
Well,
they're not in the T1 list anymore.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm dead.
I suspect what's happened there is that there was that thing like way back where it was like the scepter should be the thing grinding that, and there shouldn't be both the skill and the scepter because you get the weird things where you have you to support both, and
But I don't know. I don't know.
Well, no, I agree. I actually don't think that was on purpose. I suspect that was a mistake.
Okay. Yeah, but I did notice it last night actually. Yes, you're right. But that probably just needs fixing.
Fair enough. No, I saw it. I was like freaking out. I was like, they took them away. But we're going to move on to the last part of the minion stuff, which is more pressing for the 0.2 release, and that is specters. The first question we have is that I was unable to spot in the reveal footage whether or not we can basically unbind a specter from a bound specter. Do we then
Not
have
currently,
to have...
but we are going to add probably just like you chuck it in the disenchant window and it changes it back, kind of thing, something like that. That'll probably be coming like immediately after launch, just because we haven't had the time to quickly do it. But it'll be the same for Tame Beast as well, where you can turn both back into the original gem.
Perfect. Next question is that an image that we saw on Reddit about a week ago showed the Jamandra Act 2 boss being spectrable, which we can only assume was a bug as it was shown in the 0.1 client.
That is a bug. And I honestly, it is the greatest mystery to me. I had that happen on live where I like killed him, and then it came up with the Ray Spectre UI, and the skill's not even like out, and I'm like, how in the world? We genuinely cannot even comprehend how this has happened. And like, there's this level of reproducibility that is, but there's just nothing.
Well,
it doesn't make any sense.
You know the bug I run last night, which I've had on live before as well, and I've like no one can do any explanation as how this is possible. But sometimes when I go back to Act 1 Town, I just get the PoE 1 UI for all of the NPCs, like the old conversation UI from PoE 1, and no one has any explanation as to why this can occur. And it's just so random. I was like, why that? I've run into it like 3 times in all of the playtesting that I did. I've had it like happen like 3 times. I was like, what the hell, man? Like, how is this even possible? Like, sometimes it's just really, really like that. It's just incredibly bizarre.
Well, anyway, you're not going to be able to raise the boss as a Spectre. I don't know why in the world that randomly UI is appearing. One day we're going to figure it out. There'll be something that happens, and we'll be like, oh my god, this explains this thing, and it'll be at some number of years down the line, and I got no clue.
Yeah.
It's funny. Another question is gem scaling. Will higher levels Bind Spectre gem have scaled the minion's power and or spirit cost or something else? What are we looking at?
I don't think it scales the spirit costs, but unless they've done that recently. It definitely will scale the power, like 100%. I just don't exactly know how, but I suspect it's your traditional, like, the level of it kind of thing. So,
it'll change the level of the monster, yeah. And there's some special lookup table that relates to what level the monster is versus the Spectre level is, and I don't know what dark magic was done to derive that, but effectively it scales the monster.
It happens
level.
with this, the exact same thing, by the way. Right. So it'll work the same way as that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And one last question with minions before we can move on, so people who don't like minions can settle down. What determines the spirit cost for a creature? There's some theories going around. I saw one being based at the experience multiplier, another one that seemed more accurate, which was based at the % life modifier, based on the data mine information, that is. But what determines the spirit cost of the specters?
It is
I thought it was just determined by designer for every case.
Yep.
Isn't it?
No, it is a...
No shot. Really? Well, they wouldn't? They have
sort
to.
Of. Generally speaking, it is just a... some sort of multiplier, or there's some sort of math applied to, yes, how much loot or experience it would have given, which we call the effectiveness of a monster. And it is relative to that, which it's not information we hide, so it's not really relevant. It's not like a problem or anything. And then I know I think as it gets up, it kind of squishes it so that you don't get such extreme values. That being said, there are some cases in where we've taken the base monster, made a Spectre variety of it, and adjusted those numbers slightly to either intentionally make it cheaper or intentionally make it more expensive based on other external factors. There's not a huge amount of manual work like that going on. Most of the time it is just straight up relative to the amount of XP or loot they drop. Which I know Spectres don't, I mean the base monster.
Fair enough.
All right, so we're on to the final section here. We have some rapid-fire questions, just a few of these, and we're done.
Yo, what the fuck?
Boys, so we're kind of on the last portion here. In the Q&A rapid-fire section, the most common question that I got so far was a perfect jeweler orb drop rate. Are you guys satisfied with the drop rate of things like greater and perfect jeweler orbs, or did you want to have some adjustment done with these?
I think they are certainly a little bit too low. We're increasing them in kind of various ways, but there is at least one other change which I don't know if I've talked about, but right now in O2O, if you use the one that 6-links it, you don't also have to already go 4-link to 5-link to 6-link. So it just bypasses all the steps at least. So at least now when you have the 6-link orb, you don't also need a 5-link orb. And I mean, the 4-link orbs are relevant, but you at least don't need that one in between. So that will at least help in that axis. But
Nice.
yeah, I would say they're a tad rare, especially the 5-link. I think that should be a bit more accessible. I don't mind the 6-link.
Well, the 5-link will become more accessible by virtue of 6-link.
That's true. By virtue of that, it will be, economically speaking as well.
Fucking trade league.
So yes, yeah, I mean, sure.
All right, that answers that then. Go on, Gazi.
Visual clarity, rares versus blue monsters, being able to spot them without needing to hover over them. Like maybe a hue around them or something. Is there any plans for this?
Don't break our immersion, bro.
I'm personally not a fan of the for now glow thing that PoE1 has. The intention was to make it so the mods would make it visible enough. There might still be a few that need some
I have
adjustment.
something I want to try, which is like, you know, it's going to make it feel a bit more in-world, but I need to try it to know if it's the right answer. It won't be like a, you know, again, just a color shift to the, or a Fresnel. It ends up looking real tacky, honestly.
It's cheap and arcadey.
Rares were always meant to have one mod that is visual. Maybe it's not recognizable immediately, but something that at least can make you say, oh, there's a rare because it's some skill is going off or it has some visual. Whereas Magics do not, which I agree is a problem. So yeah, we need to do something there. I have me and an FX artist spoke about something and we want to test something, and I'll see. But
just reskin every month.
It'd be nice to be able to solve that in a way that doesn't like make it just feel like there's all these colors on your screen and you know, you're actually again still caring about what the monster is more so than just like whether or not it's gold, yellow or blue kind of thing. So, but again, it did really look tacky. Like,
I have a particular hate for Fresnel glows in games. I like people use them because they make things really visually obvious, but yeah, they look lame.
Agreed.
True.
So this next question here is a follow-up from the previous Tavern Talk we did. It's about lockstepping. You guys said you were making a hybrid version of it, and so we're kind of curious of the status of that, and if you guys have any information to share about the.
Unfortunately, we haven't had time to.
Yeah,
to do
still
more on
we
that
just
one.
have no. We don't even have predictive right now, right?
Yeah. So no, it hasn't been done yet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. Next question is searching nodes in the passive skill tree. It's currently very hard to see what nodes apply to your search prompt in the passive skill tree. Will this see any improvement?
I 1,000,000% want to improve this. It's a matter of just finding time for the UI programmers to do so. It is pretty bad. Like, yeah, it's especially with the new size as well, with it just being a lot larger. It is pretty awful to try and search for very specific things. Yeah.
The next question here.
I'll make it happen. I just hopefully it won't take too long is all.
All right.
So another question that we've seen is about API improvements potentially. For instance, being able to, the current NeverSync can't use this filter where you can't do like tiers 1, 2, and 3. You can't hide them individually. So improvements around that specifically, or additions to API in general. Is there any update on this?
So tiers 1 like.
I suspect the rarity tier of the dropped rares are not exposed to the item filters.
It should be.
Really? Was that not done?
I want to have that.
That's the implication.
Get
there.
it in.
I was
what I've
actually
heard,
not
yeah.
aware of that. And
Get it in.
Sometimes we just miss the obvious things.
Yeah.
Code it in, bro.
Well, that would
What
be
the
trivial
fuck?
to add, though. We could probably do
Code
that.
It was
Never
something
think,
we
man.
did that was also obvious and very beneficial. Oh no, it was the tier of the skill gems or something. I think we were adding, if not already added,
Right.
as well, because that was another thing you could filter by skill gem, but not by the.
But rarity
tier of it.
rarity tier should be fine
Yeah.
to add.
That should be 100% should be fine to add.
All right. Next question we have is localization improvements, as in different language support. It's been asked by multiple people. Is that something we're looking at for point 2 or forward or future?
I mean, there's certainly 0 to 0 isn't going to have any extra languages, I believe. I think there was a list of languages that we still were planning on adding, but it's not like in the immediate time horizon. Yeah, like there's nothing on 0 to 0 though.
Just kind of a random question, but currently how hardcore works, because there's no league, there's just the standard, is if you run hardcore SSF and you die, you become softcore SSF, right? So I'm assuming that if you die in hardcore Dawn, you're going back to the base.
Actually, no. So we are actually going to make it so you go back to the non-hardcore Dawn of the Hunt League, and you know it's funny because the reason why originally we made it so that hardcore of a league went back to standard instead of back to the lower version is that we actually had people in standard. In the league were getting annoyed that people would die in hardcore and then be above them on the ladder. Because the people in hardcore were actually better players at the time. This is a long time ago. People in hardcore were better players than the people not in hardcore.
Still
And so we actually made that change because of people getting angry about that. But I think these days that won't be a problem anymore. So it's probably fine to just have that.
Even if it is, we could just delist them from the ladder.
Yeah,
for
we
some
could
amount of
probably
time.
delist. Top of this ladder, and then now someone from hardcore came and went above me. So yeah, that was the reason that was originally like that.
All right, and next question here, and I'll send over to Gazi, is visual clarity specifically in regards to delirium affected maps. So sort of in the in-game, you're basically going to be deliriusing most of your maps if you're juicing, and it can be a little monotone in color of the saturation. So
I mean, I'm iterating on this. Like, I literally multiplied the delirium fog intensity by 0.5 yesterday. Just as like, now I'm going to look at it again, and then maybe today I need to even lower it further or whatever, you know, like 100%. It should be addressed, at least mitigated, if not all the way addressed in O2O, yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Awesome. 2 more rapid fire questions. First one being private leagues. Will we see the possibility of this during the early access stage of the game?
Should be in early access, but not in the near future. We just need the web guys need to get time to sort it out. And once that's done, we'll get it in.
All right. Last question. I would like to circle back to the API question, and that is regarding being able to see your character on the website that we have at PV1, but it also opens up the possibility for patho building imports.
Yeah, yep. So that is something that is being worked on. Same team. There's, you know, we'll get there soon. I mean, even internally, it would be nice for us to be able to look at characters on the website because, you know, like we can just look at anyone's character as like admins, and that's just nice to be able to do. Just for, you know, just for investigating things like why is this character OP and that kind of stuff. So yes, it'd be nice if we had that.
All right, well, that pretty much concludes it. I have one fun question for you on the way out the door, which is what do you predict the most commonly played class is going to be for the first week?
Well, obviously the Huntress, right? Like, obviously, there's going to be a million people wanting to try that out. So, cool. Yeah, I mean, look, it'll probably be some ridiculous number, like 70% Huntresses or something. I don't know what the number will be, but something like that.
I mean, you would assume so, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
But I mean, after that,
after that is.
Is that tougher to understand?
So Amazon or Ritualist then? What are you going with?
Oh, okay, right. You mean in terms of sanity? Well, okay. I reckon Ritualist for some reason. I just reckon. But maybe that's just because it appeals to me more. Like,
problem is, if I knew why one would be getting way more played than the other, then I would go and solve that.
Right. But I mean, to me, it's like I immediately taken the slot.
I'll pick the other one. I'll pick the other one just because I can't both pick the same. So I'll pick Amazon.
Right.
And I'll do it just because of the name and the Diablo 2 association, and I'm just going to pray that everyone just wants to play Javazon.
In my last playtest for the Ritualist, I took the ring slot, and then I didn't have a ring in my inventory. So I just forgot about it, and then I was like 20 levels later, I was like, oh crap, I still haven't put a ring in my third ring slot yet. It was like completely pointless. But hopefully the top 2 too many players do that. It's not only just
pointless because the nodes
because there's a downside. So I was like sacrificing I forgot to add the ring.
Walk in.
All right, well, we'll see who's right come the launch, and thanks for all the time and answering all the questions. Anything last you want to say on the way out the door here? We're done now.
I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Good.
All right, cheers. Thanks for your time, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There it is.
Right.
There it is. Hey,
All
good
right,
stuff. Good stuff. Good little interview. I mean, they were on there for ages. That was a long ass fucking thing, bro. I've been fucking gaming for a million years here. Feels like. But good, you know, some good questions, some good answers all around. It's a pretty good interview. Can't really complain yet. That's what I thought, bitch. That's what I thought. Stay down, pussy. Stay down. All right. So I don't know if you could tell. I was deliberately not progressing super hard because I don't want to freak you guys out. You know, with too much progression. Focus this one out. Focus that one. Don't want to freak you guys out too much with too much gaming. Died again. One final run. This is literally the last run, chat. If I die in this one, it's over. Okay, I'm not.